Hello, everyone, and welcome to the. I'm not going to call this the last Malazan live spoiler talk because I'm going to be doing more, hopefully in the future, especially with the novels and everything. And I'd love to have all these wonderful people back on. But we are going to be talking about the final entry into Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is the Crippled God. I finished this a couple weeks back, and I try to get this as scheduled and live as soon as possible, but I had to wait a little bit. I feel like it was just yesterday we were talking Dust of Dreams, and that stream was awesome, and we had to hold back a lot because yeah, we had to hold back a lot because the Crippled God is kind of the continuation of Dust of Dreams, and it being one big book. And I'm very glad that I read these as one volume, essentially. So, but without further ado, we have some ascendants here today with a massive convergence with another guest that's possible to show up through the Chaos Warren. We're not sure. I heard he's a critical dragon. We'll see if he pops in, but we do have all the familiar faces that we've had throughout pretty much all of the streams. The only one really missing is Rhythma, but she is still reading her way through, and we obviously don't want to spoil her. No. But we will start off with Andy. Andy, how are you doing? And when did you finish the Crippled God for the first time?
I'm doing fantastic. I think the Crippled God finishing was in December of 2020. So I think I'm probably the furthest away from anyone, especially because Philip reread it recently. So that's when I finished.
He's actually not there yet.
No. Oh, that's true, because Dust of Dreams was the last one you did. Okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe not. We'll see. But yeah, I think December 2020.
Very cool. So not, I mean, not terribly long, but it's everyone say hello to Mama Nuts.
Hello.
I'm Mama Nuts.
Yeah, so everything that I remember definitely has staying power, because it's been here for at least a year, year and something.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I feel like these last 2 to 3 years, for obvious reasons, have like vortexed. Like we've just been in fugue, and I'm coming out of it and realizing that things really did happen like 2 to 3 years ago that felt like they were yesterday. And it kind of feels like all this kind of breezed by too. So I feel like, Andy, it probably doesn't feel like that long ago.
Right. Yep. I read it during the pandemic. That's all that matters.
Yeah. That time warp.
Yep.
Alan, what about you?
I finished it a year ago. So, a little over January of last year. It was one of the first books I read last year. And then I talked to Andy about it, actually.
Yeah, you guys had a video. I got to start that video and haven't got to finish it yet, but I always enjoy watching you two talk. And Andy's always trying to get a fight out of you, which is fun.
It's literally a story of my life. Everyone is always trying to.
Not me, Alan. Not me.
That's not that, Jimmy. That's not true, and you know it.
I mean, whatever would you mean?
Everyone is on. I was trying to provoke me. People want me to fly off the handle. That's why, because I froth at the mouth. So that's why it is. That's why. No. This discussion, I'm going to be eloquent and professorial
and measured.
Measured. I'm not. It'll take the last 2 seconds till we talk about something that excites me, and then I'll be back at yes.
Well, there are a lot of those moments in this book, and you like this book overall a lot, right, Alan?
Blood
tornadoes. I knew it.
Yeah. Blood tornadoes. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life, and it's awesome.
It is awesome. Philip, I think you are since you're not there on your read, you were the furthest removed. Is that right?
It's like 6 years. So yeah.
Wow.
I think I beat you all on that score. But I am in the middle of Dust of Dreams, and that is reminding me a lot of things because the two really kind of blur into each other for me at this point. And so I'm remembering a lot of the threads that just carry through into the Crippled God. And there are, like Andy said, there are these moments that just stick with you. So I remember significant things. And of course, I'm always talking to MalazTubers and watching MalazTubers videos and other people's videos. So I've been reminded of elements of the Crippled God quite a few times over the last couple of years. So I hope I'll have something to contribute to the discussion. It's really just wonderful to be here with the four of you. And I hope that the Critical Dragon will join us through the Starvald Demolane Warren.
I hope so. Yeah. I think it was Spitfire Storyboards that said, Jimmy is Tavor's sword, AP is Carabas. He will come. Or
Yeah.
will he come? Yeah, that's pretty good. No, Phil, we're always glad to have you, and I was relieved that you decided to jump in because I know last time you were saying I haven't read Dust of Dreams in a while, but obviously when it comes to like a final installment of something this epic that you obviously love very much, that it's fun to talk about. And I don't know about you guys, but like, so I get a little stressed out for these. I do. I prepare and do these things, but when it comes to like the finale, I just was looking forward to it today. I didn't really feel that. You know, one, you don't have to worry about spoilers. We can just let it all hang out, which is awesome. But it's also like just recapping the journey of getting here. And I've now spent hours talking to all of you. And it's been awesome. But I don't know. It's almost like a bittersweet moment. It's like your last day of school. You're happy it's the last day of school. But at the same time, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'll have this again. So I do plan on doing more streams as we do like the extended stuff and the God is Not Willing. I think I'm going to read that with Alan at some point. Are we still doing that, Alan?
I think we're doing it next month.
Are we doing it next month?
Are we doing it next month?
Yeah, we could do it next month.
Doing it next month.
I'll figure it out.
There we go.
It's probably on my calendar upstairs.
Yeah.
I thought it was March. I could be April, Johanna. I don't know anything anymore.
Alan, it could be whenever you want. No pressure. No pressure, bud.
I will also say, as a reader of The God Is Not Willing, it is way like lighter as far as a read.
It's quicker.
All I care
than
is that it's
than a
less than
Malazan
500
book.
pages. I only care that it's less than 500 pages.
Yeah.
I don't
But
care.
it's not even, Alan, it's not even like a heavy Steven Erikson 500 pages.
Look,
like
if you
does
split
purposely
if you
kind of
split
change his
Carcanis
style.
into 3 different books and told me that just like, hey, you should read these 3 Erikson books, I would probably read it.
Well, they are. They're broken up into 4 books usually.
No,
See what I did?
sorry. If you give me Forge of Darkness and broke it up into 3 different books, like not Carcanis itself. Like if you just gave me Forge of Darkness, be like, look, Alan, these 200 page or these 400 page like trilogy of Forge of Darkness. I'd be like, nice, 300 pages, yes.
There is something about that, especially when it's a Malazan book.
And just so everybody knows, I finished The Crippled God on December 30th last year. So
Did you really? Like 2 days from the
Yay.
Nice.
I was just about to get to you, Joanna. I promise.
sorry.
No. I wasn't leaving you out. Now I feel bad.
no, I didn't. I'm sorry.
genuine.
Oh yeah, no, I feel bad.
I'm kidding. You're fine.
I feel bad for you.
Feeling bad.
Jimmy feel bad, Johanna.
I'm the youngest in my family, so I'm used to having to interject all the time. Sorry.
Yeah. We are family here, aren't we?
Yeah,
It's true.
we're all grab a
Malaz
cusser.
family.
Yeah, we're in the Malaz family. Grab a cusser. We're going in. Now, one thing I do want to say is I feel like this is the one time where I am certain that my breakdown is better than AP's when it comes to the prologue, because there is no prologue.
Oh,
Very strong.
I
Nice.
saw my boy.
For like 5 seconds, people were like, "Did Jimmy just turn bad?" That was.
Look, I'm here for the heel turn, Jimmy.
That would be a battle I would lose, I think, if I had to go against AP's analysis skills, because he's like the best at it. But there's no prologue here, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little sad. I know it's like we're getting into it, we're off the bat, but I was a little sad. But I thought the opening poems in this book were really good, from Fisher. And to see the opening of it just be Cotillion and Edgewalker arguing, and Cotillion's like talking about these chances, and he has these blades, and I'm like, what in the world is about to go down? And that's kind of how I felt the entire book. Like, where's all this leading, and what's going to get answered? And I think a lot of stuff does get answered here, but there are some things that are not answered, and we'll probably wait till a little bit further in to talk about maybe some of the things that we wish would have been wrapped up, or what we liked that was wrapped up. Because I think that's an important thing to talk about. Obviously, everyone here and in the chat has read the books, but I do think that's an important talking point. And how we maybe can set expectations for people who do want to read the series and things, because this is like everything else in Malazan, it's very different than the other things that we read, and it also ends quite differently, I think. But yeah, Crippled God, a lot of stuff goes down. Do you all have something that stands out to you? Obviously, Alan has blood tornadoes, and I would agree with that. That stood out very much.
The last 200 pages of that book are just a huge battle. Like Forquer Laseo getting punched one at a time in the face. I love it.
It
like,
was so
this
satisfying.
Scene, boom, this scene, boom, this scene, boom. And then also, I couldn't save her.
No.
Is my other favorite part.
Yeah.
You know, for this sprawling of a series, I got to tell you guys, and you know, I get emotional during books. That happens for sure.
Yeah.
There were things that caught me off guard in this book, and I'll just go ahead and say it. This rocked me to my core whenever they realized that the kids have forgotten how to play with toys. I know a lot of people don't like the snake storyline and stuff. I wouldn't say I disliked it. I would say I was interested in what I was getting, but it was very, very sad throughout the entire thing with the snake. But that line, I was like, oh, this has happened in history. A bomb has went off in a small town somewhere to get rid of a target, and a family has lost kid, you know, and a kid is in the rubble of their home with their friends dead, and the toy, like, how do you ever pick that toy up again? And like, I don't know, guy, like, it rocked me, and I kind of like I was taken back, very, very taken back. And it was one of those moments where you're like, it transcends the book you're reading and you start thinking about real life. And
what was the weird Crystal City? Like, Philip, is that a read on and find out thing? Like, are you going to plug the, because I didn't know what that was. Like, how come the one kid
that comes up elsewhere? I don't.
What is it then? Why is this kid like, I touched a crystal, now I know all things that occurred in history? Like, what is this Crystal City that appears out of nowhere and, you know, informs the children, and then they move on? Philip,
I'm not
how
sure.
can it not be answered in the novels of the Malazan Empire?
I'll confirm that, Alan, when I get there, but I don't think that comes up elsewhere. But I do agree with Jimmy about his point about children and how well Steven Erikson writes children's, and how he makes me empathize with them because of their vulnerability, perhaps. But I mean, he does vulnerability really well in an array of characters. But I always end up feeling really invested in the children in his series. And there's just something almost inexpressibly emotional about the way the children appear, and their innocence and their vulnerability and everything else combined. And so that, for me, the snake in general was actually a really compelling part of Dust and Dreams and the Crippled God. It was a really, I feel like it gets to the heart of what Erikson is doing as an author in many ways. And I know sometimes people are like, what's the snake? You know, I don't get this. How does this relate? Why is this here? For me, thematically, it's so rich and so interesting and so important to the overall message of human vulnerability and all of that. So, but yeah, so Jimmy, I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah, and whenever they called Tavor mother and Fiddler father, I was like, nuh-uh. You know, wife in tears. I'm like, God damn. Fiddler has also, I mean, he's clearly like one of the more popular POVs, but like in this book specifically, like not just that moment, but hearing Kalam and Quick Ben being like, he's the toughest one of us all. And you're just like, man, Fiddler really has been through the ringer. And I started rereading Gardens of the Moon already. And yeah, it's a problem. So I started rereading it, and you realize that you see Fiddler in the prologue and he's just young. And you're like, oh my God.
Is that Pran? Or is that Fiddler is in the prologue?
Fiddler is in the, so you have,
he talks to Whiskey Jack.
Oh,
he talks to him in front of Paran.
Oh, wow.
Okay. They don't say his name, but he's a soldier that has a fiddle on his back. Yep.
And he's like 16 or something. Like,
it's been so many years. I need to reread Gardens of the Moon now.
I'm doing actually, for anyone who cares, there is a Malazan read along going on the Malazan subreddit, and they have a stream for first time and then for rereaders, so they aren't going to spoil people. And it's really slow. It's like a book every 8 weeks or something. So I'm going to try to do the first 3 with them, because I remember 4 through 10 pretty well, but I have forgotten a lot from 1 through 3. So I'm going to reread those. And that's why I'm doing it. So yeah. And it looks like we actually haven't answered Alan's question, by the way. Vladimir said that was Ikariam's creation to replace memory. And then there was speculation here from Patches saying that possibly First Empire Ikariam ruined. So
okay, well, this goes back to what I keep saying that no one will do is I want, like, the Malazan book that I want to read more than anything, that I've said more than once, is the freaking First Empire one that no one is writing. So
that would be sweet.
Like, I want to see Decembalakis. Like, that's what I want to see, and no one's gonna write it. So
Steven Esselmont, they're still very young. We got chances.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, you never know where they're going to go next, right? I mean,
If any of them are watching, we would love to know.
I would love a First Empire series, please.
I'm a pretty big fan of First Empires in general, like even how things form. I'm a pretty big fan of that in history as well, so I would be down.
But the thing is, was it actually the first empire?
Well,
I don't care. I just want to see the symbol.
Well, you know, one thing I've kind of realized after getting through the Crippled God, and we see all this stuff happening, but this whole time they're marching over the desert of glass. Like this whole series, they've been trekking through history, literally on top of history and on top of fossils and all these ruins of things that have happened in the past. And it does feel like another turning of the page of another page of history that we've got to experience. And I just think that that's I don't know, it's like really subtle, but I love it. Also, I forgot to do my trivia. I always do trivia at the beginning of these. And this is the piece of trivia for the Crippled God. But after finishing Dust of Dreams, Erikson took a break to do some archaeology. I don't know why I put quotes around that. In Mongolia, like I don't know what that was supposed to mean.
Just slamming Steve's doing some archaeology.
That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. But during that time, he experienced a number of health setbacks, including getting sick, eating soup made with rancid goat head, that made him anxious to complete the Crippled God, the final book in his 10-book series. And this is a quote from Steven. I realized if I killed over in Mongolia between book 9 and 10, wherever my gravestone was in the world, people would annually piss on it. So I thought, okay, I got to get this thing finished. So I came back to Cornwall and just wrote my butt off and got it done. So fear can be a driving force in these things.
Wow. Alan, you're not eating rancid goat head right now, are you?
Pasta.
The fork hit as soon as I said that, and it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
It was good timing.
Good Foley work.
So yeah, and he, you know, I thought it was interesting. So fear can be a driving force in these things, and fear kind of plays a role all the way through the series as well. Fear of where are we going? Fear of who are we fighting for? What's the end goal? And we finally get to see a lot of what Tavor's been thinking and what was the plan all along, which I thought was amazing. And that gets highlighted when Mael and Kroll talk about what is to come in the beginning of the book. They talk about Tavor saying that she's a mortal woman who refuses to speak, yet they follow. Tremendous respect to the bone hunters and Tavor. And Kroll says, you cannot feel tears underwater. And Mael says, why do you think that I live here? That's a heavy hitter. Mael's awesome. Mael really
That's amazing. That's a fantastic line.
It is.
I mean, especially when you consider where Mael came from. He was called by other gods, a particularly bloodthirsty god, you know. So apparently his time with humans, and particularly with Tehol, I think you could say, has actually changed him. You would think that humans would be the ones to change when they're close to the gods, but actually in this case, I think there's an idea that Mael has sort of softened over and become more humane over the centuries, and in interacting with humans. So that's kind of cool.
Which is interesting because as you, Philip, as you know, and Alan, the gods of the sea in most mythologies are vicious. I mean, so the easiest example is the Odyssey. I just finished reading. Like Poseidon is the main bad guy in that. He's the one who holds the grudge against Odysseus for so long. Well, I guess Zeus with the cows, but for the most part, it's Poseidon that causes it. So it's interesting that in this mythology, Mael, at least at the present time, is, I would say, maybe the most human of the gods. Well, maybe not human, that's not the right word, but the most compassionate, maybe.
He takes on a manservant role, so
yeah, that's true.
Says a lot about him right there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, El Marcos is yeah.
I was going to bring this up, the fact that Malak Rel, like whenever I remember making that connection, going, wait, Malak Rel, I hate this guy more than anyone in the series, but I love Mael. Like, how can you have this is a very interesting point. How can you have a follower that is so evil that follows such a god that I adore? You know what I mean? And I mean, that's pretty interesting. Like a god that seems good natured and then has this follower that is wicked.
if you need a kick in the pants to read the novels of the Malazan Empire, there is a scene in Crimson Guard where those two characters interact.
Oh, I
So
would love that.
Yeah.
it does
Okay.
happen.
And that's just say too that it's not always the god's fault what the followers do in the god's name.
Right. Yes. And maybe in some ways, maybe Malak Rel is a good example of what Mael used to be, you know, or possibly a representation of what his values used to be before he had the interactions with Tehol. But there's also like a difference between Bug and Mael, though. Just like there's Dassam and Desambre, or if that's how you say it, there's a difference between these things. So I think that's actually pretty fascinating. Andy has a customer coming in to pick up another copy of The Crippled God.
I like Bug, and I think Malak Rel is a good example of a douchebag. I hate Malak Rel. I hate him so much.
This is my friend Matt. He has not read the series. He definitely just Googled Tehol Benedict and said this is by far. But it's funny because you're
He's
not
right, actually.
Yeah, you're not actually that far off.
Oh, I love Tehol. He just
He's just throwing
his letter in this book, wasn't that just the best? I love
yes.
that so
Yes.
much.
I had that highlighted, Johanna. I love that.
I laughed so hard.
And Breeze is another one that I don't think gets enough credit when we talk about like all timers. Breeze is awesome.
Loved him too.
The Benedict kid, the younger Benedict.
Yeah, the one basically, you know, he's the hero in a lot of ways, and his relationship with Anaricht, I don't know how to say that.
With Anaricht, yeah.
Yeah, I like the relationship a lot. I thought that was one of the better parts of his storyline, but also I love whenever he's talking about Diligence and he says, "Come find me." Like Diligence is looking for like him to kill him, and he's like, "I'm right here," and I'm like, "Let's go."
Oh yes,
So badass.
Yes, that was awesome.
We've talked about a couple of them storylines. But one of the things Crippled God always reminds me of is like there's certain viewpoints or stories that I didn't like, that the ending of which in Crippled God like rectified, or at least like I understood the journey to get there, really enjoyed it. The snake was one where in Dust of Dreams I didn't really get what the snake was doing, but then I thought really was worth it for what happens in Crippled God. The Briss storyline is the same thing as well for me, where I thought after Reaper's Gale, actually really after Midnight Tides, I was not super interested in where his story was going, and found him somewhat arduous to get through. But then it was so worth it at the end, especially with all the names that reflects back into the Assail, is just like so cool. So like there's just a lot of those stories. I mean, the whole First Shore, honestly, storyline was also one that I was not super interested in Reaper's Gale when it was touched on, or even Dust of Dreams, but that was so good here. So I do think that there's some impressive turns there.
Sword and everything, yeah. Incredible scenes, incredible. That was amazing.
I think if you go scene by scene, I do actually think this book had my favorite just independent scenes throughout the entire book. Like my favorite book is still The Bone Hunters for sure, but I some of the epic scenes that we get here and payoffs I thought were really good. Let's talk about the shore though. Let's talk about, because I think the Teist Leoson are probably one of the more polarizing things in this series, really, of the main 10. I know there's probably more in the novels, but for the main 10, a lot of people take a look at this and they say, the Leoson are kind of idiots. You know, I hear that a lot.
I will say it again if I need to.
Go for it. No, I know, and I actually want to hear, because I'm somewhere a little bit in between, whereas like I wish we would have had more to them earlier, but I think that they serve a purpose in the book, and I love the battle, by the way. The battle between them and the Sheikh. Yidon, or is that
amazing?
Yeah. Dude,
he's Steven Erikson's vote for the toughest fighter in the entire series. Jeden Derrig. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. That's what Steven Erikson says. He's the one who would beat anybody. Yeah.
I loved him. He actually grew on me more and more throughout this story. And
well, when you first meet him, he's butchering people who disagree with him. Like,
yeah. But I think also what won him over for me were his interactions with, I think it was Pithy. Am I thinking right? The one who died?
Yes, and he shows remorse for Pithy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just and their conversations even leading before that, because I just felt like he was very, even though he was kind of this fierce fighter, I just felt like he showed a softer side to himself. in those interactions.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I fell in love with him. I loved him. I thought he was fantastic. And my heart broke when his death scene was so powerful. And like the Tistandi all kneeling and Jan Tovis coming up to him and him saying that he sees home, or he has some sense of peace or some sort of vision of home, something like that. Do you recall that?
No, because there's a point where Twilight says, we're home, and he's like, I don't feel like it's home, and that's talking about when they get to the shore.
Oh, but I mean, when he dies, though.
But that's what I'm saying. But then he dies, and he says, "I'm going home. Like I'm home." And it's like that was always going to be the end for the end. Always was going to be him dying, I think. And it's also interesting because that means he did all these things literally for the end, like for everyone else to feel like they were home.
I feel like I need to see some art. I'm sure there is amazing artwork of that scene, but I just feel like I need to see some artwork of that whole entire scene because I see it's like beautiful in my mind, even though it's war and horrible. But I just feel like there are so many. I always overuse the word cinematic when I talk about his battle scenes, but again, this is just another one. It really is just the best way to describe it. It really is, because there's just so much that's taken up in your visual, in your vision when you're kind of sort of taking in everything that's happening and everyone around, and just the whole atmosphere of everything. It's incredible.
And Jimmy, I have to say this because Alan will be disappointed if I don't. If you want to know more about the Leo-san and all that stuff, Carcanis is the place to go. In fact, I think with this whole thread, the shake and all of that and the shore, that's the part that is in Dust of Dreams, which I'm reading now, has become much more interesting to me the second time because I read Carcanis. So there are some really interesting, or the two books that are out so far in Carcanis anyway, and so I'm actually really pumped for the third book to come out. So I mean that you do get more of that, and I think more things fall into place when you've got that under your belt as well.
I've heard people say that if you're going to do a reread, that you should try to do Carcanis first and then do the reread. I clearly did not listen since I went ahead and started reading Garden of the Moon again. But whatever.
I totally agree with one more meme. That's
Philip, are you how do you feel about those people who are reading the 10-book series and maybe choosing not to read the other novels until a reread or till after? Do you think that that's an okay way to go? Do you not recommend that? Do you recommend reading the novels alongside the 10-book series?
I can just tell you what has worked for me, and there's so many different ways to approach it. I mean, there's so many series and there's such a rich world, and there's just there's no way to go wrong actually. I think so. But what worked for me was what I did was like 6 years ago I read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I said I need to reread this, and I need more. I need the other stuff. And having read the other stuff now, I've read everything except for A Sail, that is Malazan related at this point. It's really helped a lot for me to appreciate what I already loved. So see, there he is right there.
Boss is here.
The man, the myth, and the legend.
Yeah. So there's no wrong way to go. It really worked well for me though, Johanna, to read Carcanis and Paths to Ascendancy. And now I'm almost done with all of the Malazan Empire, and I
think this is in the.
It's all fantastic. It's all good.
It's the price of doing business with Andy, as he maintains his hustle.
I should ask Steve again if I remembered that correctly, but I think when we were having when Iskar Jarek was having his sort of tournament on his channel, which was a lot of fun, by the way. It was just these matchups, and then you'd go to the next bracket, and I believe that Steven Erikson said that Yaden Derrig would have been his pick to win the whole thing. I believe that's the case.
I won't take the slander against my boy Karsa.
I stopped following that tournament when Coltane got knocked out because really, Coltane at the top followed very closely by Karsa. Everybody knows this.
Aw.
I love your love of Coltane so much.
Honestly, it's inspiring. Like, it makes me want to reread Dead House Gates so much.
Oh, me too. And
Everyone needs to
I
find
tell
someone.
everyone who reads Dead House Gates, go watch Alan's video. Go watch
Everyone
Alan's
needs to-
Dead House Gates video.
My friend Noelle just finished Dead House. She can't watch this because
She's
not.
Coltane's bae.
Yeah,
right?
she calls herself Coltane's Bae. And
After me, like 2 seconds.
after.
Everyone needs to find someone to love them the way I love Coltane.
You're gonna have to tell her to get in line, Alan.
I already did. More
She
than once.
is the cutest. Like, she posted something on Twitter. She said, "Still missing you."
She was
or
bawling
something.
because she's in my Discord. She literally posted she was bawling at the end of Dead House Gates. Absolutely inconsolable. She could not be comforted. And I knew this whole time. So she's updating us, and I don't mean to derail too hard, but she's updating us while she's going through Dead. She's like, Coltane's the best. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see him in the rest of the series.
Always true.
It's-
I also was excited to see him in the rest of the series.
Oh,
I was excited
no.
about the series.
then she goes, now she's going, she goes, I'm starting Memories of Ice. I need to see when he comes back. And I'm like, well, you might be waiting a while.
Well,
Cool.
Alan, all I can say too is I think you're going to enjoy. We're a little off topic here, but I think you're
It's
going to
fine.
enjoy The God Is Not Willing for various reasons. And
Okay.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Like, all I need is Pormqual. What is it? High Lord Pormqual. He's dead. Good.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's literally a serial killer in my house who's just I got really excited about. I guess my wife is dead now. I'll tell you in a second. I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm saying.
Oh man.
Give me a second.
I hope she's okay. Yes. So I can't remember. Oh yeah, we were talking about Yeadon. Is it Yeet, Dan? Philip, how do you say it?
Apparently, I pronounce
I
everything.
could be
correctly.
wrong, but I was saying Yedon Derek.
Yeadon. I like Yeadon.
We've got Steven Erikson here, so he could.
I emphasize the end. I don't know if that's right. I say Yadon. I don't think
Yadon.
that's how it's grammatically
It
spaced.
sounds like a boss. Yeadon. You know. You know?
I usually look at the pronunciation guide on the Malazan wiki, but
They have a
That's so studious
pronunciation
of you.
guide. I probably should have
Yeah.
gotten it all along.
yeah.
Yes, Vladimir. Yeet Dan.
I probably
As
still
the kids would
mispronounce
say.
them.
As the kids would say,
Yeah.
Yedan. Someone said Yeet Dan. I love it. But I thought that his arc, by the way, when we talk about the Shake and Leoson,
Okay.
yes, I kind of wish we would have had more of the Leoson earlier. I really do. But what I got out of it, I was happy with. Like, I really, really loved it.
Mhm.
Especially the kneeling, which I think,
Mm.
Johanna, yeah, you mentioned that. The kneeling was just, it was like one of those moments where I kind of like sucked in a breath, like, it was pretty
Yes.
amazing. Philip is correct.
I
That
felt like I could
pretty
see like
short.
sun rays coming out of the sky or something. It was just amazing. It was just such a brilliant scene.
Yeah. Alan, how did the Leosin versus Shake battle work for you?
So I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about it till y'all just brought it back up. Again, it's been a year since I read this book.
Yeah, it's all good.
Most of what I remember about the Crippled God comes from the snake reaching the Malazans or the Bone Hunters on, except and that storyline, because I know the Shake battle, the Battle of the Shore happens after that.
Yeah.
Too many Andy. Like there's too many Andy on the shore for it to be. Like, I know y'all are like, oh, is Alan gonna say? Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool. Like it was an awesome battle scene. Absolutely.
Sick.
But again, they're fighting in, where are they? Carcanis, or where are they? They're
The
somewhere.
ruins.
For
The
sure.
ruins.
Yeah,
of-
the ruins.
Of Carcanis, and I'm like, okay, like, okay, can we go back to like the people who are fighting like against the Forkal Assail and see the Crippled God, like, and I know it's important, and I'm not like,
You liked other pieces
I
more.
like Andy.
Yeah, you loved other pieces more.
Well, what I
Yeah,
loved is that as soon as I finished the book, I posted about it, and within seconds, I got a message from Alan: "Blood tornadoes, Johanna. Blood tornadoes."
Like
Within
much
seconds.
of what I remember is that final battle, like in the Crippled God, because that's the dreams in this book bleed together in my
Sure do.
because I read them very quickly, like right after each other. But it's that last like 300 pages that is, and again the stuff in what do I want to say, like the mainland, the main world, the material plane. The stuff in the wherever we are in the desert.
The glass desert, right?
Thank you. And they could have gotten across it faster if they had Coltane and the Wiccans rather than dying of thirst. And also, can I say, Tavor, what are you doing not ejecting freaking Blistig and his
that was my next point.
His mutinous face, like shunt him right into the desert. Like get out of and I liked Blistig. And then he turns into a madman. And I'm just like, you got to excise the tumor, Tavor. You have got to cut out the rot.
I loved that she didn't, though. I personally loved it because so the thing is, I feel like Tavor, one thing that became really clear to me is that she knew what she was doing. She made some very calculated decisions. Yep. And you learn in this book about how she's basically a strategy prodigy, if I could put it that way, like
that was cool.
And strategy prodigy. And so she knows what she's doing, and she makes a very calculated decision by not killing Blistig. And she tells him that too. She tells him about how she saved his life, I think like 3 to 4 times. And then you could tell even in that scene that she's not even sure she's making the right decision, keeping him alive. But then she puts him in charge of the center formation in the battle. Yep. And I loved that because she puts him in the front of the center formation because she knows his leadership skills. So she takes a risk, and I think it pays off. And then she puts, who was the other person? Ferretin Sort on another front, and Kindly on another front. And just thinking, this is what I loved about, I know I'm jumping ahead to the end and I'm sorry, because I still want to go back and talk more about the snake and talk more about everything else. But as far as that scene was concerned, though, like that whole battle, to me, for one thing, when I got to the halfway point in this book, and I know I talked about this in my video, I thought everyone was going to die. I thought, I did. I felt because the word fallen, and I'm like, I've been reading the Book of the Fallen. What did I expect? But the word fallen started coming out. Yes. Nice. Yes. Yes. Oh, I'm
Judas,
so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up about the Judas part, because I actually did get a very smart comment about that in my comment section for my Crippled God video, kind of talking a little bit about biblical sort of symbolism in this sort of, desert, and with the blood, turning the blood to water, that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say though, with where was I going? I'm sorry. I just lost my train of thought. But I think that what she does there, I think it was just so powerful to me, because I thought everyone was going to die. And every time I read the word fallen, every time it came up in the text, I just felt this weight, this ominous weight on my chest, thinking, oh my goodness, we're all going to die. Everybody's going to die. And fortunately, not everyone died. But at the same time, it was so powerful for me at the end, in that last battle, especially, and just seeing who was leading in what place, and just thinking about where they came from, thinking about how I've been on this journey with these people for a long time. And even the people I don't know on this journey, who've been on this journey. Yeah.
You're saying the biblical references.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, Matt from Books Rebound is the one who wrote a very long, eloquent comment discussing his idea about that. So I'm glad you said that. It's fascinating, because once he pointed that out, I'm like, of course, Blistig, the Judas part, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. But anyway, I love that she didn't do that she didn't kill him. And I just love Tavor. There's so much we could say about Tavor, but wow, what a fantastic, it just all comes together for me in this book. And even those, not everybody dies, fortunately, but with the people who do die, and with everyone, I just felt like so much emotion just thinking about where everyone has come from and having their moment. So
yeah, I also think that it's unfortunate for Blistig that we see the best of him in Deadhouse Gates.
Yes.
And then we see the worst of him later. There's so many characters, like Karsa, for example, where we see the worst of him early, and then we see the best of him later. And I think for someone, in Blistig's situation, I think we're still being asked the same questions, though. Like, there are parts of him that are admirable, and and that those parts of him, I think, hint at the possibility of redemption for him. Just as there's so many characters in the series that we see start out badly and then end up doing something that makes us understand them, or we get another perspective on them. And it's Blistig's misfortune that we see the worst of him later on. But I think we need to remember the Blistig of Deadhouse Gates, the guy who refused to do the wrong thing, when Pormqual was falling into the trap of Malak Rel and all that. So you got to remember that. That's part of this character too. And how you should approach, I think, human beings in general, that we're all complex and made of conflicting parts, and we have admirable parts and parts that we would rather people not know about. So yeah.
And I think that part where Tavor confronts Blistig, I think that's exactly what she's doing. She's actually, in a way, for us as readers, reminding us of Deadhouse Gates, reminding us of that role. And it's just so brilliantly tied together for me there, I thought.
Yeah. I thought the first POV we get from Blistig in this book was really, really tough, because you see all the trauma that he's been through and losing Keneb. So even though Blistig, was not my favorite person in this book, I felt for him. And I thought Erikson did a really nice job of portraying that. And in that short time period, in just that little POV, it was really impactful. And you could tell Blistig really hated Tavor. Like I think he truly hated her.
He thought she was incompetent. He thought she was leading them all to their deaths. Like Blistig has survived this long, and he doesn't think she knows what she's doing. Like,
well, remember,
this far.
He's the guy who was traumatized by what Pormqual did, right? So he has a history there of not being able to trust people in charge who are supposed to know what they're doing. So, that's where he's coming from, I think.
That's really well
this
said.
far, and she hasn't told them anything. Like I think he assumes that at some point they've earned the right to know what's going on. Like, look at how long Blistig stuck with the Bone Hunters, and he's followed her, and he's done what he's told. And look at what's happened. Old red hand dude, burn face. What's that guy's name? Tenebralta. Went crazy at Yigatan. So he's watched all these other people fall off, and he's stuck with it. I think he thinks he deserves to know. And nope, sorry, suck it, Blistig. And I mean, that would make me mad. I'd be mad too. And now he's done so much to survive, and now he's going to die unwitnessed, face down in this desert from dehydration.
It's pretty rough. I mean, it's a rough sentence to accept. And it is very realistic that especially a veteran like Blistig would say, I don't accept this. Like, I deserve a better end than that. I don't think that I if you say anything about Blistig, is the fact that it's a very natural progression. Like, it's very realistic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I hate what he becomes, but I really, dang, I am right. Nice. It happens on occasion. But I hate what Blistig becomes because of how much I love Blistig from Deadhouse Gates. It's like Philip.
Yeah. I remember coming out of Deadhouse Gates and him being like one of my favorite people in the book.
Same.
Other than Coltane.
But it's also true that the whatever personality traits he had that made us admire him and that were behind his actions in Deadhouse Gates were the same personality traits that led him to become what he was in the final two books, and that's just, you get put in the wrong situation, and qualities that can be admirable can become, dishonorable. So that's human nature.
That's very true.
I think that speaks to the complexity of moral decision making and how we can't really just have a one strict model for, okay, this is the way we act in every moral situation or every single situation.
Yeah, like sorry. Well, like the idea of loyalty. Like, loyalty is admirable until it's not, right?
Yeah.
Until you're loyal to the wrong person, right? So
well, and in a way, but at the same time, Tavor is asking for loyalty. I mean, she is kind of asking for loyalty. She is kind of asking for a blind faith. And in this case, it turned out to be the right thing to do. So it just gets so tricky. There's one particular quote that happens early in the book in chapter 10. I don't remember who said this, but it said, somebody is saying of Tavor, she gives us silence because she dares not give us anything else, what we could see as cold and indifferent is in fact the deepest compassion imaginable.
Yeah, I had that one written down because that one resonated with me quite a bit. I love that. I sent that to a couple people that aren't even reading the series, friends. That's how I sell people a lot of the times, like my friends that are like lukewarm readers. I'm like, look at this quote. And this
I
book is
really
cool.
love that. And I think that's powerful. There are so many things I want to say about compassion when it comes to this book, so many things. But I think it's interesting that she stays silent, because I think it's very easy to judge people and to say, you don't have compassion. And she doesn't do that. She doesn't.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that silence, I think.
Yeah. Andy, do you have anything to add? I feel like I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I think I'm just sitting here absorbing all this great stuff.
I kind of am too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, Johanna, you said that really well, that like there is, oftentimes when we talk about like moral relativism, it's in a very negative perspective, but I think the complexity of moral decision making, like there's a place for moral ambiguity in a positive light of, and even, I mean, we're talking about biblical examples. There's very clear biblical examples where like Rahab the spy in the Torah lies to someone about, the Israelite spies, but she's praised by God in the Old Testament for doing that. So like there's a place for moral complexity. And I think I've talked a lot about this being a postmodern work. I love how that is a part of it. And one of the things that makes the Assail and also I think the Leosin sort of the big bads are that they are totalitarian, that they are this is the right way, what they believe,
Justice.
Their fanaticism, their Valjeanness, only a Sith deals in absolutes. Like that's kind of like what makes them the way that they are, and even justifying like what they want to do to the crippled God, steal his heart and soul and his power, and they already did that to their own God, right? Which is what created the glass desert. So there's very much a commentary of a positive view of moral relativism and complexity versus totalitarian black and white thinking that I think is very complex in the background.
Yeah.
The idea of moral certainty is, and Andy, you just I just thought what you said was just so wonderful and eloquent. It just seems so relevant to the world we're in right now, doesn't it? The idea of being sure that you have the right path and that everyone who is different from you is somehow wrong or evil or bad, and that they deserve to be stepped on, and that's scary to me. That's scary to me, and of course, it's throughout human history. We're not unique in this era. That sort of thing, and that divisiveness and all of that. But yeah, I think it's a hugely important part of this. And then you have, I think, the idea of empathy and compassion being this attempt to understand where the other is coming from, which is the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about that. And one thing I also want to bring up, because you brought up that interesting biblical example, Andy, about the lie. So I think that also kind of reminds me of something that has been swimming around in my thoughts about this particular book, and that is about the truth. And, I just brought up about how Tavor was silent, and she doesn't give all the information. She doesn't tell Blistic she does withhold a lot. And was that the right thing to do? And then the fact that a lot of people withhold from her throughout the series. Lestara doesn't tell her about Felison. Hood even talks about that, about how, that Tavor holds a guilt in her conscience over that encounter, even though she doesn't know that she killed Felison. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, Philip, but I really wondered when I listened to the one part where Badal confronts Tavor, and Steve, you can tell me if you want to in the comments, But there was that one part where Badal confronts Tavor, saying that she has words for her or a poem for her. And then later on, you kind of switch over around that part of the book to a scene where with Hood, I think it's Hood talking to Shirk and talking about how he saw through Felison's eyes with that moment when Tavor basically kills her sister without knowing it. Right. And then you switch back later on, and Tavor confronts Badal and wants to know what the words were. And Badal no longer remembers what those words were. And I wondered so hard whether Badal was going to tell her that she killed Felison. And maybe, but maybe it was a mercy again, another mercy that that Tavor did not receive those words or did not learn that. I don't know if that's what Badal was going to say, but that was kind of what was going on in my head. But anyway, I thought it was fascinating, regardless of whatever that was. It's just fascinating, though, to contemplate the truth and when it's appropriate to tell the truth. And there's also, I think, lines throughout the book about the truth has claws, and the truth hurts, and that is an important part of compassion. That's an important part of empathy, and that's why it's not easy. That's why it's not easy to have compassion or empathy. Actually, I just read a book kind of going into the neuroscience of compassion and empathy in a chapter, but it's because it requires that we look at things that are so uncomfortable. And there's a difference, by the way. Okay, interesting. Yeah. But there's a difference, by the way, there's 3 different types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, which is kind of rationally understanding what a person's going through. There's emotional empathy, where you feel what somebody is feeling. And then there's empathic concern. And with empathic concern, that's the wish for somebody to be relieved of suffering. And that's what leads to compassion. But if you just have feeling empathy, you might want to turn away from it because it's uncomfortable. You see somebody burning, you're like, oh, I don't want to feel that. I'm not going to look at that. And it's easy to turn away. But to have empathic concern means that you're willing to actually be present with what's uncomfortable. And so I guess that just kind of takes me back to the truth and being able to confront things that are true and how hard that is and how that's sometimes concealed between characters in this book. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up, and I'd be curious to hear any of your thoughts about that.
I just getting over the fact that Alan wrote douchebaggery in the comments.
It's tremendous. But right here, one of the commenters says, telling the truth can be done in bad faith. If Lestera tells Tavor about Felison, is that a good thing if done just to hurt her? And then Alan adds on, many people couch their douchebaggery under the guise of telling the truth.
This is one of the things I have to teach my students, because it happens at the high school level all the time, because it happens in reality shows and the crap that they consume. There's all these people who they're just callous and they're rude, and they do say things that are true, like, hey, you look fat in that. Like the crap happens at my school all the time. Like, I mean, maybe they do, but that doesn't make you on the side of the angels. Like, that doesn't give you like, you're not on the righteous side of that. You're just being a douchebag. And the problem is, if they call them out, like, if you call them out, they're like, what? I'm just being honest. Like, isn't honesty a good thing? It's like, you know what you're doing, you sociopath. It's like Schrodinger's douchebag, where you were joking, if you were serious unless you were offended, in which case you were joking. Like, you are both douchebag and not simultaneously. Like, it's just, there are too many people that do that, because we have such bombastic blowhardiness in this country right now, to where everyone is screaming truth at the top of their lungs. Truth doesn't mean anything. I have to tell my students this all the time. Like you said, you hear the word truth, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Not here. Like, that is a word that means nothing. People say, I'm just telling the truth while lying through their teeth, or I'm just telling the truth while being an awful human being, which is completely antithetical to what is trying to be, like, what the thematic elements of this freaking thing is. You know what I mean? Like, you're not being compassionate by being a douchebag. It's just not.
No, we all feel that way, Steve.
Sorry.
We all feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like that stuff. That's people trying to gaslight other people under the guise of righteousness, and it drives me crazy. Drives me absolutely crazy. And so I'm trying to make my kids aware that this crap happens, because they sit there, they feel bad about themselves all the time. And there's these other people who get these other kids that get away with it because no one will call them out. And then they become adults that do that. So
yeah.
Well
Yeah.
said.
I really like what Steve said here. He says, it's a thing I discovered when writing these books. There's a time to stay silent for characters, and often these prove to be the most powerful scenes of all. And it's something that I've noticed reading through all 10 of these books, and some of the biggest moments came in. Like, I would not say that I was like picking it out like that's what was happening, but I said this just feels different than a lot of the other series that I've read. You know, and some of the things that I've read have these absurd monologues, right? And I sometimes I like that. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like it's like popcorn, like go get them. But the subtle silence sometimes carries a punch that lasts a lot longer than when you close the book. I think.
And Jimmy, as an actor, you learn that on stage. Like beginning actors, your default is you need a powerful scene, raise your volume. You need to be mad, yell. That's the default for people. But what I had to learn from good directors is, sometimes it's much more powerful if you are like, you're enraged.
Yes, dude, you're speaking to the choir. So my first time I ever did my first WWE tryout, you had to cut a promo in front of William Regal and some of the producers in WWE, right? Very nerve-wracking. Everyone goes in, and it's you guys have seen it 100 times. It's like the wrestler promo, right? It's the point the finger. I'll see you Saturday night. I'm gonna beat you up. Blah 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 blah.
The cream rises to the top.
Right. So it's my turn. I walk up, and I just drop my voice. I'm gonna tell you about a story about a kid that came from absolutely nothing in southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm gonna tell you about a kid who didn't have a chance. You know, and you drop that tone, and you start and. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. And when you drop your tone, and it's not silence in this regard, but those dramatic pauses where you leave off on a sentence and you give them the uncomfortable feeling of settling with it. I did that a lot. And that was something that catapulted me above a lot of my peers in wrestling because I knew how to slow it down. I didn't have to yell at the camera when I was mad. You saw it with my eyes. You saw it with my facial expressions, and my words were cold, but they were serious. And that is something that you're right. Acting does it. Obviously wrestling is acting in a lot of ways. And it's something that it comes across the page here in Malazan very well. And it always stuck out to me that it felt different than a lot of the other epic fantasy that I've read.
Oh, there's time for hollering. It's just not always.
Yes.
So how did you feel, Jimmy, the scene with Tavor? Because, you know, she's so silent most of the time. She's so withdrawn. But what about the scene where she draws the dagger?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, also, we get a Tavor POV in this book. I mean, like, it's everything it should be. Like, that's how you do it. That is how you do it, folks. You know, they want it. You hold it back until you can't hold it back anymore, and then you give it to the people all the time.
That was such a good scene.
It's storytelling. It's great.
That one part, I think, like Lestara. Is it from Lestara's perspective, if I remember? Because I just remember Lestara walks over, and she goes from watching Tavor to going and standing right next to her. And I don't know, I had such a weird experience when I read that part because I remember feeling like I was Lestara. Like I just felt like I was so immersed in that scene and I was Lestara. I was Lestara for a minute. It was the weirdest thing. I was like, I'm Lestara. I am standing next to Tavor. It was kind of surreal for me, but powerful.
Also, Malazan Sapper said, I read all these books as they came out, and I never had anyone to talk to about them. Thank you for all of this, and thank you, Mr. London, for changing my life for the better. Well, we're glad that you're here, and we're glad you have something to talk about. I know my experience wouldn't have been as amazing without all these people and Philip correcting me on all the things I've gotten wrong.
Telling us about the novels of the Malazan Empire.
Yes,
they should pay you. They should pay you to be on the publishing team. Like
he's actually an affiliate for Esselmont.
I wish. But no, they're so enriching, and all these series are fantastic. But I was going to say earlier too about the silence thing. That is such a great observation and such a great technique, and not the easiest thing I think for a writer to learn necessarily. So that is something that I think you have to deliberately feel out and try. There's a wonderful play by David Henry Hwang called The Sound of a Voice, which is it's a very short play, but there are so many silences, really effective silences in that play. And there are whole scenes where not a word is spoken, but there's just so much that happens anyway. There's just two characters, and there's so much that happens between these two characters right on the page. It's incredible. It takes a lot of, I think, it takes a level of talent to be able to use that for a writer.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of little things in this book that I liked, among many others that have been repeated throughout the series. But one thing in chapter 4 I remember perfectly, is the whole chapters leading up to what does Fiddler think. This is like post Dust of Dreams battle, and it's like, what is Fiddler? And everyone's talking about like, oh, there's Fiddler, this Fiddler, and you see like all these people are expecting Fiddler, and you realize how important he is to the thing, and then you finally get the Fiddler POV at the end of the chapter, and it's just, as like, if you take a step back, as like writing, I was like, oh, I'll use that one day. Like, I was like, that's awesome. That's a really good way of seeing this.
I forgot about that freaking battle at the end of Dang Dust of Dreams. I mean, I remember it. I just forgot to talk about it. There's so much else to talk about. The freaking end of Dust of Dreams with the bleeding Kachane Narut short tails. Like, get it together and stop killing the Malazans. When I watched the Bone Hunters just like all beneath, I'm like, no, I love the dinosaurs, but what are you doing? What are you doing to me?
What other series can you say that in? I love the
my-
dinosaurs, but what are you doing?
Freaking short. Why? I forgot. Why are they there? Why are the freaking Naruk attacking them? What are they doing? Like, what are they doing there?
So the Naruk were in a civil war with the Kachane Chamal, and
Still?
yes, and then that was whenever Caliph, is it Caliph?
Yeah.
Yes. So she finds Stormy and Gruntle and makes them the Mortal Sword and the Shield Anvil. Right. So then they come back, and then the Kachane Chamal join the Malazan Empire.
Yes,
the Bone Hunters. But so you have that whole thing, and that's at the end of Dust of Dreams when they're in that weird, I called it like a messed up VR session where Stormy and them are like looking through the Kachane's eyes and are like battling. It's like some weird VR experience, like they put on a headset or something, which was awesome.
Since we're going backwards, do you mind if I bring up so one thing that I've actually was just reflecting on that scene again just the other day, because I was thinking about, well, I don't want to digress, but basically Lestara's dance was fantastic.
That's my next point, Johanna. You're reading my mind today. Because to recap it, Cotillion possessed Lestara in her shadow dance that we saw at the end of Dust of Dreams. It saves the one, I'm forgetting the other gentleman's name, but Tavor's life for sure. And he helped due to her love, and Lestara wants to give him some of his humanity back by giving him some of the love. And it's a really compelling moment where Cotillion is like reluctant to have that. And it's a very complex thing, but go ahead and talk about what you were going to, just to recap, I want to put it out there, but go ahead, Johanna.
No, it was actually going to be that, just the interaction between Lestara and Cotillion at the beginning of this book.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about it so badly in our Dust of Dreams talk, but it was jumping ahead. But it just, what a beautiful conversation, and how he alludes to his regret over Apsalar too. And what Apsalar does to sacrifice her love for Crocus for him.
Yeah.
And just sort of having this sort of talk about empathy, and talk about empathy being very sad, very tragic, very uncomfortable, and his willingness to see sort of from the human lens.
Yeah, speaking of Cotillion in the context of empathy, Ruth and Bad has a wonderful video out, a very recent one on this very topic, and it's Cotillion as the cipher of the series.
I've watched it; it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it.
I haven't seen it. I gotta watch it.
I highly recommend it. And now I'm calling Ruth and Bad the cipher of Malaz too.
I feel like Cotillion changed over the course of the series, and it makes me sad because now Shadow Throne is just he's an insane loner. Like, his number 2 guy has drifted over to the insane side, and Shadow Throne ain't changed.
I think Shadow Throne likes the Cotillion's changed.
Do what?
I think he likes that Cotillion has changed.
I think you're right, Jimmy. Yeah.
Because Shadow Throne has the best quote in the whole series, maybe, is whenever he said, how much suffering is enough? Like, or why does there have to be any suffering?
That's true.
And
That's
and I think, and even at the end where it's like Cotillion's kind of like, yeah, I kind of went against the plan. And Shadow Throne's like, yeah, you did, didn't you? Like they figured us out, huh? And like you could almost tell, like he almost enjoys that there's a little chaos between them or something.
Well, then that goes
Good
back to
cop,
me
bad
saying that
cop.
Shadow Throne is the best.
Shadow Throne's awesome.
Amazing. I love Kellen Bed.
Also, just when he's
They
talking,
definitely
to
have
people.
a good cop, bad cop thing going on.
Yeah.
Or crazy cop and compassionate cop.
Give me
thing.
a hard crime.
By the way, I felt so dumb after watching Ruthen Bad's video on the cipher of the series because I don't know why I never made the connection that the shadow dance that was Cotillion's doing. I didn't realize that was Cotillion's doing until reading the Crippled God, but then I never made the connection. His name is Dancer, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm like,
Cotillion is the French word for
So
it's the
obvious.
French dance, right?
Yeah.
It's
right.
Cotillion's is like, isn't that what you took like your debutante like niece to? Like, oh, we're gonna have a cotillion, you know?
Only in the South,
that's
Alan.
right.
Oh,
I
well,
forgot. Isn't that is actually, wasn't that kind of a dance, a cotillion
yeah.
in the 80s or something? Or
Yeah.
A cotillion's a thing. You
Yeah.
take
It's still a thing?
You take
I don't know.
Southern bells to it. You take them out of there.
Oh,
I
there's
never
still
did
Southern
it,
bells?
but I remember it being a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, today we're gonna take Big Daddy down to the cotillion, and he's gonna buy me a brand new dress.
Yes, I love that video. That video
That's a
was
Great.
brilliant.
video.
Alan is a Southern gentleman. We all knew it.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear.
Blanche Devereaux is my aunt.
Ooh, read Path to Ascendancy, Young
Yeah.
Shadow Throne. Alan,
Absolutely right. Patches.
Alan, want a buddy read it?
It's out of order. I want to read it so bad, but it's out of order. I have to
Yeah.
read Stonewielder.
What do you mean?
Publication.
Oh, well, yeah. There's no order. You can
Publication orders king.
I have autism, guys. Like I gotta follow the order.
Honestly, I'm pretty big about publication order on things. Even I've had a lot of people actually tell me to start with Path to Ascendancy. People say like it'll make all the other stuff easier.
Yeah, I want
I
to read
said
Path of Ascendancy really bad.
I
Yeah,
don't
me
know.
too.
All I know is I'm reading The God Is Not Willing with Alan next month or April, whenever Alan wants to read it. So I'm
Yeah.
reading
That's
that
what I
and
said
then I'll
you were.
figure it out. I have
Yeah.
no idea what I'll read after that, but I'm excited to read other ones and then talk to you all again.
Well, the good thing is there's no lack of choice.
That's true.
Yeah.
I want to give this little shout out. This is from Traveler. He's one of my patrons, and he has a reader that was watching me go through and kind of reacting to my reactions. But he said Chapter 7 resonated with me, that Tavor's plan was actually to free the crippled god all along. All these broken people we have seen as enemies ever since Memories of Ice, suddenly it turns out that they are actually our allies, the ones that need helping. I think it is very cool narrative choice by Erikson and fits the overarching theme of compassion. And I thought, I said, hey, Trav, do you mind if I use this? Because I think that's like as good of a wrap up in layman's terms that you can do. That's exactly how I felt in that moment when you finally figure out the plan, which was very rewarding, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very, very rewarding.
Do we ever see anything of Fellison Younger again? Philip?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I want to talk about.
You mean in one of the other series?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Someone in the chat can correct me if I'm
What
wrong.
happened to the cult?
I don't
was
think.
so excited.
I was very excited for that.
As far as I know, I mean, unless she appears in a sale, which I haven't read yet, which I highly doubt she's going to appear in there. So
It seemed like a really cool storyline, though. You know,
I was
ready.
expecting big things just because of like the cycle of Fellisons. Like I was just excited to see more.
She's got her own personal Demosthenes with the stones in his mouth, like walking around
Mm-hmm.
with his open, weeping sores.
And Bryson said Kirkanis is my favorite. Hope you'll cover. Yeah, I definitely will. I don't know when.
oh, we got a little tease there. We got a little tease there. Okay.
I'm so excited! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited right now.
Legitimately.
If I can't have Coltane, then you know what? I will take some Fellison Younger, like her weird leper colony, or
First Empire.
In First Empire, right?
Either
Alan,
one,
me and you
either one.
connected over that though. Do you remember we talked about the Bone Hunters and we said there were some, like when we talked about people's reactions, we said some people didn't like the plague stuff, and me and you both were like, I love the plague stuff.
I don't
thought
know
it was
what people's problem is with the play.
It was
It's freaking awesome.
so good.
But Plagues are the one enemy you cannot fight. Freaking Thucydides said of Pericles, who had led to the golden age of Athens. Pericles, one of the greatest statesmen who has ever existed. The one thing he could not plan for was the plague that cut through 33% of Athens' population, and he succumbs to it. That sucks. My students weep when we get to that part of Pericles, because he's been built up as this paragon that everyone's like, yes, screw you, Cleon, you war-hawking douchebag. And then Pericles gets got by the freaking plague. Every contingency plan. Sorry, I got super... I apologize.
No,
I love it.
Apologize.
Alan sometimes will.
Greek history.
Alan will sometimes sound blast his lectures in his Discord, right? Or you used to.
I used to. Yeah,
I just couldn't understand, but it always bothered me because I was like, I wish I could jump into your classroom.
Alan, I think it says something about you as an educator that you can get your students to weep. I think that's beautiful.
They're so sad when Pericles dies. They're so sad.
That's so true.
Yeah, I love the plague stuff, and if I get to
so.
see Fellison younger again, I'll be very excited, because and at the end of this, I kind of want us to go through like the things that were like tied up, some things that were left open that maybe we want to see more of, or we wish it had been wrapped up. And that was going to be one of my big points, is that I wanted more Fellison younger. And you know, sometimes a warren will open, and out of nowhere you will just get a dragon. You'll get an Ode to Terrell dragon, and he will appear.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am so terribly sorry that I am late. I had other things scheduled today, and then when Jimmy told me about this, I was like, but.
Well, we're glad you're here. Someone said that I was Tavor, and I slammed down my sword, and you may like you were a Carabas, like you may show up, you may not. We had to see what was going to happen, and lo and behold, just like in the books, you showed up. You showed up.
So whereabouts in the discussion are we, seeing as I'm incredibly
all
late?
over the place.
We have been all over the place. I was about to talk about how Fiddler, right before the march, and I think this is in part 4, he says that in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, the historians will write of our suffering, and they will speak of it as a suffering of those who serve the crippled God, as something fitting. And for our seeming fanaticism, they will dismiss all that we were and think only of what we achieved or failed to achieve. And in doing so, they will miss the whole fucking point. Fallen One, we are all your children. And I'm sorry I dropped the F-bomb, folks, but I had to quote it, so it is what it is.
I think J Rogue 6 asks an interesting question there too, and this would be something for AP to talk about. I think.
Boom, AP, we're putting you to work immediately. We're on the clock. So Ruth and Bad says Cotillion is the cipher of the series, but Philip and AP say Toll the Hounds is the cipher of the series. How do those two ideas work together?
Well, the easy answer is obviously Ruth and Bad is wrong. No, Steven Erikson has always referred to Toll the Hounds as the cipher for the series. And when Philip and I had that discussion with Erikson, we were talking about it. We're trying to explore what he meant by it. So that position about a lot of the structural stuff, the telling a story with intent to address certain themes, and being aware that it is a story that is being told for a reason. It's not just showing you the things, but there's an inherent through line that is thematic, and it is dealing with this sort of frame narrative. All of those different aspects about the nature of story, the nature of history, are being shown very overtly in Toll the Hounds. So I hope I've summarized Erikson's position relatively accurately.
Who cares?
But when we think of the series, and Ruthen had an absolutely brilliant video on this, where he shows how Cotillion is representative of one of the themes all the way through. And so in understanding Cotillion, you understand the themes. And that is what he was sort of pointing out. So you can see Cotillion as a cipher, as a way of unlocking the series, because he's an example of that arc. But that's because he's one of many examples of certain things. So it's not that Ruthin is right and I am wrong, because that clearly couldn't happen. But it's also not that I am right and that Ruthin is wrong. It's we're looking at different ways of exploring the same thing and different ways of unlocking. Yeah, fine. Okay, Steve. Why do I bother trying to explain things when you just...
But I think it's interesting because when you look at the whole cipher of the series thing, I immediately think of the narration. So Toll the Hound is narrated by Krupp on some level,
Right.
but also the series as a whole, as we learn at the end of the Crippled God, and this is, big spoilers, everybody.
No, they're good.
It's being narrated by the Crippled God, is by Kamensong.
Incredible, by the way.
So this is very, very important. It's not just a gimmick. It's not just burying a story within layers and layers and layers. It's important because if he's telling this story, his story, a story in which, by the way, we thought he was the villain for a long time, and he does some terrible things, but we end up wanting his freedom. We end up rooting for the Malazans who are trying to free him, and we end up seeing and understanding, and there's this whole thing about compassion and empathy here. And that very much relates to what Ruthin Bad was brilliantly explaining about Cotillion and Cotilion's evolution as a god who is learning compassion as well. He goes from, in Gardens of the Moon, to using sorry in the most horrible way. And eventually there's a wonderful scene in, the Bone Hunters, when he and Absalar have that exchange on the ship.
Yeah.
Absolutely moving. But you see the same theme, being put forward by Cotillion's arc as you see being put forward by this framework narrative, where we learn that it's the Crippled God the whole time telling the story, and we're learning to empathize with him and understand that this whole time he was coming from a place of terrible pain and exploitation, and we're being asked to understand this. So I think that they relate actually really well together. They mesh really well around that theme of compassion and empathy.
Yeah. And there's certainly like different aspects of that. Like I think you could probably pull different examples that aren't just Cotillion in the series for that. And one of the big questions that I thought, like, this is probably my favorite quote in the book, and I think I actually brought this up in our chat, Philip, on your channel. And I think out of all the quotes in this series, this is the one I take home with me the most. Krugava thought about a shield anvil who only embraces those who are worthy. It's only offering a reward, not an embrace. And I think that's a compelling thing to think about. And it makes me think about my own life, right? If I only extend my grace or my forgiveness or redemption to people who are worthy, then that is a reward. That's not an embrace. And that's a tough thing to think about, because when you don't want to give it is probably when it's the most appropriate. Like, that's when it kind of becomes that, right? It becomes mercy. I thought that was fascinating.
I also do love, because that's completely true, but I also do love that Steve in this work doesn't swing the other way either, because there's a lot of pushback about free redemption, especially in Toll the Hounds. It's one of the themes that I really love. And as much as a shield anvil that only accepts those that are worthy is somewhat worthless, so is a shield anvil who accepts anyone no matter what. Rake has I think a great dialogue in Toll the Hounds about redemption for nothing is meaningless, and that Ithkovian, for all his good intentions, is actually perpetuating some sort of evil by alleviating people of their sins without any sort of retribution. And so to go a long way back, Jimmy, to something you referenced, that mention that your follower did about loving that compassion is there and learning all along that people that we were rooting against are actually our allies. I actually think using the term ally, I know what he's getting at, but the term ally there I think is not quite right. Because the position of the Malazan books are that it's worthwhile to fight against evil and against these people, but compassion also means that you're looking to heal, you're looking to make things better instead of making people pay, instead of having the hard justice of the assail. And and that is also, you know, a cipher that we see all throughout from the in the third book, Memories of Ice. Like, our ultimate bad guy there, the reason for the tennis gallery and all this terrible stuff, like, we don't kill him, we try to heal his relationship with his sister, if I think, right?
That's right.
They were brother and sister.
Yeah.
And you know, the Crippled God is not our ally, or, you know, he's not like a good person, but we're seeking to heal that evil rather than perpetuate it. And so it's a really tough place to land, because you can't be an extremist, and being an extremist is always the easier aspect, right? Absolutism, like we talked about earlier, is always easier than complexity and wisdom and momentary compassion. So I love that there's both sides of that.
Yeah, I like the Assail a lot because of that, actually.
And I would just add too that, I mean, I think that what I love about this particular book and what's happening there is that it's not compassion. It can be seen kind of as a passive thing where you just have compassion. I just wish you to be free from suffering, but there's actually an action behind it. So it's active altruism, actually. And a question I kind of want to bring up in regards to all of this is that we already, what if the person doesn't want the compassion or doesn't let it in? And I'm bringing up this because of sin. I'd love to hear thoughts on sin.
So I knew sin was going to be a big deal. You could tell as soon as like Sort had her pulled out. Like, I was like, okay, keep an eye on this. And then we got all this Dust to Dream stuff. There's a fire burning in. I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well. And it in fact did not. And I knew that it would end up being important, but sin, it kind of disappointed me. Like, I was kind of hoping that there would be a flip for Sin in the end, but we find out that she's the one who killed Keneb because she didn't want, it's Grub, right? Do I have the name right? I think it was Grub. Yeah. Because Grub loved Keneb, and she's like, I only want to be the most important thing for you. And I was like,
yeah.
Look, good for, is it Stormy that like body tackles her, like freaking
throws her off the steps,
off the spire? It's Stormy, right?
Yeah, I'm finding it. I have it in my notes here. Yeah, so Sin tries to climb the spire. It's the spire that for the Crippled God's heart. Stormy and Guess follow. Guess throws Sin back, and she loses it from being touched. She burns Stormy, but not before he tackled her off the steps while burning to death. And the impact splits Sin's skull and kills her in a tragic end.
And Stormy dies too there, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Gessler dies saving Bent.
Gessler goes up, fights the Fork OSL.
Makes me so sad.
He breaks her nose though, which is a great. It's like literally a punch. Just
look, the justice that is delivered to the Assail, chef's kiss. Like,
well, that's when Hood takes the fork. Dang!
I love it.
I've had enough of your justice. So.
I love it.
But this raises a really interesting question about the distinction between justice and vengeance. And the things that we've seen this multiple times in the series, when the most barbaric thing is done and we celebrate it because we dislike the person.
Yes.
And we think that what they have done is reprehensible. So we celebrate barbarism thrust onto them, done to them.
Carson did it all. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still
Pitiful is the perfect example. But we call that justice.
Right.
And you go, well, how is that different to what the Forkle Assail are doing?
Well,
because so much of that is dependent on perspective, and justice is a very complex and elusive concept. Because if you've ever been to court, no one loses a court case and comes out of it saying, "Well, justice was served today." The only person that says that justice was served is the person that wins. And it is a bizarre concept because we all think we know what justice is, but it's very personal and it's very narrative dependent.
Yeah, I do think in this instance, AP, and maybe this is actually maybe a good question, but I do feel like the Assail are the rare occurrence in the Malazan world where I feel like they're pretty evil. Like I feel like it's like,
aren't they trying to kill everybody?
Like these are the bad guys. Like this is the big baddie. And I know some people say I don't like that the Assail just came in the last 2 books and stuff. I actually love it because there are people in the world that we live in that are, I genuinely believe, evil. Like, I believe that there are people who are too far gone, and the Assail, in my opinion, are too far gone. And maybe I have it wrong. Maybe someone could show me a different side of that. I'm open to that. But this was a moment where I did just let my my barbarian brain go, yeah.
But okay, let's look at this, because the Assail, as the Forkal Assail as we see them, are extremists. They are the most extreme of the extreme, and they're the far end of this particular spectrum. How far back do you have to go before you go, they're no longer extremists? At what point, where is the line that you go, here is the line, other side of that is evil, other side of that is forgivable, or something we can work with? Because when they are on the far extreme, that is easy to point at and go, I can identify that. But as soon as you're somewhere in the middle, finding that line can be a lot more complex, a lot more difficult, because that line, again, varies and moves and changes. Because where does, black become white if you start with absolute black on one side and white on the other side? Where is the transition? Or is any point in between just gray? Are there different, it's all about understanding the nuance and the shades. So when we look at the Forkal Assail, they are the absolute extreme position. Have we seen any other absolute extremists in the series? You see the Liberty Consign, you see the Patriotists.
Yeah, Patriotists.
People who have taken extreme ideological positions.
Yeah.
Actually,
AP, I think there are only 50 shades of gray.
Maybe in your bookshelf.
in this book,
dirty boy,
trying to kill the guys that I like. So I like when they die, because that I like. So I'm okay with the Assail dying, and Patriotists too. They can go also. Crazy people.
I think this is really illustrated very well, though, by the Shake versus the or I'm sorry, it's like the Andy and the Leoson, right? And then the Shake or the Shadow. Is if I hope I'm getting that right, if I can remember.
Yeah, they're more related to Shadow.
Yeah, I thought that was a beautiful illustration of that conflict, and really more so conflict as a general concept.
Like, you mean the metaphor of like the dark and the light?
Yeah,
and like dark being more good in this context.
Yeah, and the Shaker trapped in the shadow, essentially, of these two things. And I thought that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. And I see what you're saying, AP, because then okay, you took it out, but then does the new worst of the worst replace that? Does that line slide down then? That's an interesting idea, and justice is explored pretty hard in this book as well, because the Forkal Assail are literally saying we're here to serve justice, and we, of course, disagree. So, do you think it's in human nature that when faced with a violent force that wants to end all things, I mean, for instance, in Malazan, right? It's like they're facing a force that wants to end all things. They want to bring justice. Is the only way to meet them with violence? Is violence is that a fundamental thing in us to meet people with that?
Are you thinking the Forkal Assail can be reasoned with?
That's what I'm saying. No, I don't think
out of it somehow.
No, I don't think so. So does that say that violence is a fundamental part of of a living being? I guess.
I mean, ask Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. There are. I think it's a question that calls for a fairly nuanced answer. Is violence sort of the default that we often fall into? And I think you do see this in Malazan all the time too, where you have, I mean, most of the books end in violence, in battles, in convergences that involve deaths and so forth. But then there are moments where these things are avoided as well. And
maybe Tool could be an example, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the fallout. And it's not always very clear that the violence actually solved the problem or made it worse.
Generally makes it worse, I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part.
But if you extend that to our world, think of the deprogramming that sometimes happens when people have been in a cult and they've been brainwashed and they've become ideological extremists. That violence, we should just get rid of them, or deprogram them, give them a chance to come back to themselves, to see the world anew again. That these are deeply complex questions, moral questions that go to the very heart of a number of the assumptions we make, a number of the biases that we have, a number of the cultural preoccupations that we have. And I think one of the things that the books do, this book and the whole of the series, is to ask questions about it, to ask us to examine it, not to say, here is the definitive answer, here is the line in the sand. It is to suggest some lines in the sand. It is to show us multiple perspectives of things. It is to show us the nuance of when can we forgive? What is unforgivable? When can we exact violent vengeance and call it justice? When is justice something else? It poses questions because this is not about supplying us with easy pat bumper sticker answers. It's the purpose of great literature, to make us think and re-examine, to make us question our own beliefs and our own positions.
Yeah, and we get to then decide what, like, I think me and Alan are on the same page. We're like, that's our line. Like, that's where we are.
Yeah, Stu Forkel Sailor, long arms,
and honestly, Hood delivering that justice to them. Yeah. Oh man, whew.
No,
go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm the worst about interrupting. But I just want to say, though, I mean, as horrible as a sin is at the end, and as glorified as it could seem that she dies, and I think it was Stormy that takes her down, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. At the same time, there's a story at the beginning of the book in which she has a flashback of being raped and watching her mother being raped. And I guess some sort of God I don't know if it's Byrne or some kind of God comes in and saves her while she's being raped and sort of channels through her. That was sort of the impression I got. And there was some talk about how humans, it's sort of like showing her this vision, the way I saw it, and I could be totally misinterpreting this, but I got this idea that she was sort of seeing this vision of humanity, seeing how humanity is raping her mother. And there's some talk about how humans are raping the world. And so kind of bringing in that environmental aspect too. So I guess part of me did feel bad for Sin, even though I know I'm not saying that I condone what she did. And I definitely think that that's another part that needs to be explored here, because compassion doesn't mean that you condone. It doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. It's figuring out, like AP said, what those boundaries are in the moment. And it can be a very nuanced sort of exploration of that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Korab's a good example of this. He's deprogrammed in a way, right? Like he was with Leomon of the Flails, who sucks, and to put it elegantly, and exactly, Alan. But Korab, I mean, I love Korab, and we see him go through a transformation that I think is really inspiring in a lot of ways. So.
And I like too that at the same time as he goes through a transformation, an amazing transformation that for me I totally bought. I totally was with it, and at the same time, up until his last moments, he still had that sort of glory of war kind of.
Well, he fundamentally didn't change that piece of him. That stuck with him. Yeah.
But I think one of the interesting things about Sin, because we've seen aspects of her story, and then we do get that flashback, that it changes her death into something where, where we were talking about, you celebrate the death of a bad person. Right. It changes into something more tragic, that she could be saved. And I think it's through that illustration of sometimes when someone cannot be saved, yes, poor Leomon. When someone can't be saved, when they've become too destructive, when what has happened to them has twisted them and destroyed them or turned them into this, that can be viewed as tragic. Rather than something where we go, yes, we're going to exact vengeance and murder them.
Yeah, I think Sin, I even put this as tragic in my notes. Whereas in the Fork OSL, I put, oh, hell yeah, at the end of that. So, like, there was a difference.
It's like Blistic. We were talking about Blistic AP earlier, and remembering the Blistic of Dead House Gates and the tragedy of what he has become in the final books, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, let me ask you a question about the Fork OSL. How much is it because they are intrinsically evil, and how much is it because they've been shaped by their culture in isolation and are indoctrinated into a worldview and have not yet been given the opportunity to learn?
Oh dear.
I mean, absolutely. Again,
In the context of the Crippled God, those two things are functionally identical in the context of this book. So they must be punched in the face.
They had
by
to have a broken
mighty
nose.
Bone hunters. And if I stop and think about it too long, I will feel bad about punching them in the face with the bone hunters. And I don't want to feel bad about punching them in the face with the bone hunters. I want them to I don't even like, everyone likes the Hood part where Hood appears. Like, I like when the people get them. Like Hood appearing, that's great, but I like it when the guys get them. The boots on the ground get to because the Forkful of Sail can't even imagine humans possibly figure out what we're doing, and they don't understand. They're like, how are they beating us? We don't get it. And then they just 1-2 punch. Like, how are they behind us? I love that. Like, I love it when the little guys are getting one over on the
bop them in the nose.
I love your Forkful of Sail impressions, Alan.
It was awesome.
And voice. That's fantastic.
But Alan, you just raised 2 brilliant points. The first is we love an underdog story. We love when the weaker, the smaller, the less powerful sticks it to the powerful, and it's unexpected, and they beat down the powerful. We love that. That is a lovely narrative that we buy in. What was that? Dodgeball, an underdog story.
Yes.
There's a reason why the original ending of that film doesn't work. It's because they lose.
That's horrible. I would not watch that.
Exactly. But the idea of the underdog winning and being great, that warms the cockles of our heart. And the other thing that you said that I think is absolutely brilliant is we love that simple, straightforward narrative. Those are the bad guys. I can punch them in the face and not feel bad about it.
Yes.
And I don't need to examine myself or stress about conscience or morality or any of that.
Well, life's hard.
They are evil.
Life's hard. Sometimes I like the easy way out.
Yeah.
Carl says Marines exhausted on the hill laughing so hard they scared the Assail army. Best moment. Yeah.
I love that.
That's very good.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's the thing. You know, we have these excellent discussions and we get so deep in the weeds, and I love it. And I also love these moments. Like that, the laughing on the hill is such a like you can't really describe it unless if you've been on this journey with us. You know,
but who are we fighting for? Everyone. No wonder we're losing. Everyone laughs.
Oh man,
That's great.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to say, like, this is one of the things that I really like about Erikson's writing, and I know that not everyone here has enjoyed every moment of it in the series, but the balancing of humor against tragedy, the balancing of humor against those very dark moments, and I know it doesn't work for everyone in every single instance. Humor is like that. But when we get those moments, I respond to it so well because I remember those moments in my life. That's how my family and my friends have dealt with some pretty dark things. Is it gets made into a joke because it's a way of trying to laugh at the demons in the darkness. It's a way to try and shed light into a dark subject.
Yep.
And it's complex, but I love that moment of, who are we fighting for? Or what are we fighting? Everyone. No wonder we're losing. And then everyone laughing.
I love that because I was just talking to someone today about I'm currently reading a book that is just really like dark and gritty for the sake of being dark and gritty. And it's kind of like super self-serious. And I just don't really like dour books like that. And yet I just finished reading The Company by KJ Parker, which may be one of the bleakest books I've ever read, but it doesn't feel so it just doesn't feel that way. The same way that Malazan never feels that way. Like dark things are happening, but there is levity in either the writing style or the character moments, like among the Marines. And I hear Abercrombie is like that too.
Yeah, he is.
These are bad people, but injected with like some levity or humor, and I like that much better than like look at how dark it is.
Those are my favorite books.
Yeah,
those are my favorite books. That's one thing. I really love R. Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing. I think it is like one of the deepest books I've read. However, there's a severe lack of humor, and that's the little thing that was just like could have put it over the edge for me, and it didn't quite get there because I didn't have those moments of like and I think that is the darkest scene I've ever read in a book is in Malazan. The funniest scene I've ever read is in Malazan. I'd kill the mule or whatever it was. I know I'm forgetting, obviously.
I died.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Rhythm just got to that part in Bone Hunters, and she's like, Erikson has no business being this funny. And I was like, it's the best moment in the 10 books. It's my favorite.
In addition to the humor, which obviously is just one of the reasons why the series is as great as it is, but I would say in addition to that, I've never felt like Malazan is that, like, some people want to call it grimdark or whatever, and I have to disagree strongly, because I feel like it's so affirming and uplifting.
I agree. That's why I like it.
In addition to the humor,
well,
it's affirming and uplifting. And I was just talking with AP recently about the Stephen Donaldson essays on epic fantasy, and the idea that Donaldson has, and he uses Malazan as an example in the second essay. And I think he's spot on. It's a brilliant essay. If you're a Malazan fan at all, you need to read Stephen Donaldson's essay. But what he says is that epic fantasy has this capacity to bring us to a point where we feel a sense of connection to the people around us, to the life around us, to the cosmos. And there's something incredibly beautiful about that. It's something incredibly moving and wonderful. And that's what I get from it. He calls it the literature of reintegration. In other words, we live in a world where we feel often these messages of alienation and isolation and meaninglessness. And what epic fantasy can do is give us a sense of that you can carve meaning, that you can be connected to the world around you. This sense of that, almost like a sense of the numinous, a sense of wonder, a sense of embracing life. And that's what Malazan gives me.
What's embracing the struggle?
Yeah.
Philip, that video, by the way, was fantastic. You keep adding to the list of essays I need to read. But I've actually been thinking about that particular video a lot since you talked about it, because I think, and I think I mentioned this in the tag video that you tagged me in, but I feel like Malazan, for me, this particular series, I did say in that video about how it's hard for me to know at this point, because I just finished the series, how it's changed me as a person. But I do feel like the themes in Malazan, they've resonated so deeply with me in a way that no other fantasy I think I've read has made me rethink or think about my own world, my present reality. And it's hard to explain that, but I do think that one thing that I really appreciate about this series, speaking of that, is that, well, of course, I love the humor, but as far as like the soldiers and the number of characters, I know a lot of people, and I was one of them. I was one of the people when I started the series that I remember just sighing when I saw the cast list for Memories of Ice, thinking, oh, wow, another huge, long cast of characters I have to learn. I was one of those people. And I have to say, I feel so differently about that now, because I think one thing that I appreciate is the way that the series makes you realize the way we try to make certain people our special circle, and these people are special, but these people aren't. And, this is what I'm holding on to, but it sort of expanded my mind. Well, it got me to see things in me I didn't like to see. I'll be honest about that. There are a lot of things that I saw in myself in this series that I thought, oh, I am kind of like that. And I don't like that, but it's important to see that. But also it got me to see the ways that I kind of maybe haven't, considered other people and considered just the way that we do that, the way that we have our closed circle of people. And I do appreciate that through this sort of expansion of the world and expansion of people, you start to see, wow, everyone is important. There's not just one special person, if that makes sense. Unless, you want to talk to Alan and say Coltane is that. But
Coltane is clearly the one absolute 100% virtuous hero of the book. And really, it only went on for 10 books because Coltane bites it in book 2. Because if he'd been alive, he would have done it in 4 books.
He would have got the job done.
We would have literally just gone to the Crippled God's Island, punched him in the nose, and like dragged him out and like
Thrown him up to the jade
shot-putted him
pillars.
back to his
spears.
jade planet or whatever. Go on, Chainsaw.
I don't know about
Yeah,
you. Go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
I was just gonna. I think so. I have to jump off because I gotta close the shop here pretty soon, but not quite yet. But I did want to jump off Johanna's comment there because I think it's so great. I want to encourage people who have just finished it or who are just finishing it, like to take a moment in your reflection on the theme, like, and don't let that pass you by. That feeling that Malazan gives you, especially at the end, because there's so much in this book to challenge you in so many different areas. You know, retributive justice versus restorative justice. Like, is justice about punishing the offender or creating that what was lost, making better in small and large situations? How does it make you think about our justice system, how our police works? And how does it make you think about how you talk to other people? We talked earlier, like, about telling the truth and how, if that is that really the highest we can get to, or is it more important to create goodness and to encourage people on a very basic level? There's so many different aspects, both small and large, that I think if we reflect on ourselves from this, I think we can learn a lot, and be better. And I don't want people to, because it's a story, just reflect on those story beats without doing, I think what the best thing you could do is think of it sort of in that full orbed sense, and let it challenge you, and let yourself be uncomfortable with some of the questions like AP asks, and you know, judge the world around you in every moment as compassionately as you can. And that's a really tough challenge that all of us are gonna fail at times, but I think it's a really, really great way to go about the world if you can.
It's a very, very, very well said, Andy.
Beautifully said.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. And then, like, blood tornadoes are a thing. And
Are you kidding me? That was so freaking awesome. Like, it got madness. Just the absolute despair of that battle at the Spire, where they're losing. Like, they're losing so badly. They're outgunned and outnumbered. And who is it? War Leader Gaul, who is just like the Kundral tears will, you know. I love those guys. Like, they're just going for it. It's absolutely, like AP said, the underdog story. I love that. I love it when, you know, because I mean, they're also the Malazans, who are the most powerful empire in the world currently, but are the underdogs in this particular story. Yeah. So
the big worth is where
amazing stuff to take in this book. So many amazing things.
And all the, like, the different people commanding the different, like, parts of it. Like, oh crap, the east is falling. Like, we got Ganos coming in from the west or whatever. Hurry up, Ganos, please.
Come on, get there. The cavalry, you know, he's got to show up, and thankfully he does.
So
I want to say the secret sauce of Malazan, though, is the combination of blood tornadoes and then what Andy just said. And I'm being serious about this because me and Alan always talk. We say, you know, we get people in because we say, dude, there's dinosaurs with arms and people with hair shirts that's made of their dead mother's hair. It's insane. Accurate. And then obviously you can go and check out anybody else's videos where they have like deep thematic discussions, like everyone here. and, you know, and it's that's the thing. Our fist pumping moments don't happen without the hard work that's put in for all of the undercurrent that makes you think in this series. I've read plenty of stories that have absurd epic battles that I just sit there and say, okay, that was neat. And then I forget about it tomorrow. Malazan is stuck with me in a way because it has both of those things. It has a ridiculous imagination behind it, on top of the fact that it also has someone that I think is extraordinarily thoughtful.
I 100% agree with that. Go ahead, AP. Sorry.
I didn't want to step on anyone else's comment, but this I think goes to, like, one of the big things that we see, like in big tentpole summer blockbuster movies, where you have these amazing, huge CGI battles, and special effects, and physical effects, and ginormous battles that ultimately end up feeling like chewing gum for the eyes. That they are hollow. There's no content to them. That all it is spectacle. There's nothing underpinning it. But when we talk about those moments in Malazan, yes, they are astounding, big, epic, and you can imagine all of the special effects and the grand scale of it. But one of the things that gives it that power is the foundation of thematic elements, characters that we have fully identified with or bought into or are interested in, that it is a combination of both. Because you can have big spectacle effects and these big grand battles, and ultimately you just go, nah, okay, like it was good. Like a blood tornado on its own, awesome blood tornado. But without the setup for it, without the characters involved in it, without the situation, without your emotions being tied to it, you just go, well, they did that in Blade.
While we're on this point, I just want to go ahead and say a shout out to AP's video on kernels and satellites. AP put that video out several months ago. I think about that video all the time. I do. I think about it all the time. No, and it really took my reading. I mean, not to say I wasn't doing that before. I think actually I'm kind of a weird reader that I tend to focus on a lot on kernels, but it really kind of changed the way I thought about narrative and the way I thought about story. And I can honestly say, as much as I love these spectacle moments, I loved War Leader Gaul. I loved some of those storylines that nobody talks about.
Haboric, I think, or I'm sorry, Duker. And Deadhouse Gates is like that. So I heard a lot of people say, less Duker, more everything else. And I'm like, I actually like
more Duker.
Yes.
More Duker. Less looking at old stuff. More Duker.
Yeah. A lot of things that I think other people would say, like, cut out, let's get to the main points. I no longer see it that way anymore. I don't know. Your video, though, kind of put things into perspective for me about that. But there's so much there that and it enriches those moments of spectacle, I think is what you're saying, right? Like it just adds more to it when you take it all in. So I just want to add that.
Well, John, thank you very much for saying that. That is so nice and lovely for you to say.
It's true. It's honestly true.
It's awesome.
Alan, I like the old stuff. So there.
I mean, I literally am taking children to Rome to go look at old stuff.
Oh,
I like old stuff.
Can I come?
Take me too.
I like old stuff. I got 30 bloody kids want to come with me to
Can I
Italy.
come?
I got to try to not lose any of them.
You should do a booktube tour.
Can I go?
Yes.
For all of us.
That would be awesome.
No,
But,
I would legit go.
no, I like the old stuff. I love the archaeology stuff in Deadhouse Gates because it's First Empire. Disembalakus stuff.
First Empire.
I just rethought, I forgot, and then remembered that Erikson just said "not yet" to the Fellison cult thing, and I got excited all over it.
Yeah,
like 30 minutes ago, I was excited about it. I'm excited again. I just like Duker because he's a historian, and I also like the for example in the Black Company books, Croker's competent, like the analyst, but he's the historian. He's the medic. He's the company doctor. He's not the soldier, the captain. Like he's there and he has to be there so he can make an account, but they keep him out of danger because he's the guy that's got to fix people when they die. So I like that particular thing, the non-combatant who is viewing what is happening, plus he's with Coltane, which obviously. So I just like that storyline the best. I love Deadhouse Gates. It's higher on mine than
I can't wait to reread it.
I can't wait to reread it especially every time I talk to you, Alan. And next time I reread it, when I reread it, I'm just gonna message you constantly.
The whole secret to why you like Coltane is Duiker, actually, because you're seeing Coltane through Duiker's eyes. Yeah. So you think it's Coltane that you love, but it's actually Duiker.
And that makes sense because Alan's a history teacher.
But who's writing Duiker's POV?
The Crippled God.
Well, and here's an interesting thing. There are always aspects of a novel that we personally may say, oh, I didn't like that. Maybe they could have trimmed that out. Sure. One of the things that I find endlessly fascinating about the Malazan Book of the Fallen, all 10 books, is that there isn't a general, this is the order of how good the books are. There isn't even here are all of this book needed editing. How many times have we heard someone say that about a book? This book needed editing. But what if we asked everyone on this panel okay, looking at this book, and you think you're going to have to trim out a little bit. What do you trim away? What isn't necessary for the narrative? We would get different answers. And that's when you start to understand.
Am I the only one hearing the aliens or whatever?
No, someone's buzzing. I don't know who it is. Is it me? You hit mute.
I don't know what that is. It sounds like a video game or something.
If everyone hits mute real quick, you'll be able to see. It's Johanna.
Johanna, how dare you?
Is it?
Whatever could be making that buzzing noise.
Are you playing a video
Johanna.
game, Johanna?
AP, it's another student playing games during lecture. You know what I mean?
Wait, we can't hear you now.
Yeah, I can't hear you, but I think your mic plug might be coming out. Yeah, I bet you can slip the mic.
Yeah, now we can't hear it. But we can't hear you when your mic's on.
Oh, dear.
Strange.
Well, but the point, the point that I was trying to make before we all got really distracted was so often when we read a book, we go, oh, this book needed, let's trim away the fat. But what one reader sees as the fat, another reader might see as the meat, depending on how they've reacted to it. And this is one of the really complicated things about editing. And it's one of the complicated things about the literary appreciation, which, Philip and I would tend to talk about a lot more than a reading experience, which is much more personal in reading for fun. But when we talk about, oh, this could have been trimmed down to make it shorter, you go, well, why is shorter better? Ask yourself that question as well. Oh, well, they could have gotten to the point faster. Well, why is faster better? What is it that you're losing out with the experience? And there are a whole lot of complex questions like that about what it is about narrative that we actually want. And that answer is, again, going to be very personal because Jimmy has things that he likes. Alan clearly has things that he likes. Philip has things that...
I get the adverb.
That he likes.
The adverb.
And I'm assuming Andy has aspects that he likes, that we all have different bits that we resonate more with, or we connect more with, or we enjoy more. And there are bits that it was okay, but maybe I could have done without that in the book.
Yeah.
But when we talk about, we tend to universalize our own personal experience, where I look at it and go, oh, well, clearly everyone's going to think the same way that I do. And therefore this book needed editing because that storyline was useless and no one needed that. And we can just cut that away. And that's how everyone feels.
Yeah. AP, I agree with you so much. I actually talked about this with Steve when I had him on Chatting with Nuts, and I was talking about how I kind of dislike how a lot of people will say that this is very specific, but in the Song of Ice and Fire, a lot of people feel like the last two books are very bloated and meandering, and I disagree completely. And if they were different books, I don't know if I'd like them as much. And what he said, he said, when we write, it's not masturbation. We're not trying to expand on this just for our fun, right? There is a reason we wrote these things, and sometimes without the payoff. Obviously, in the Song of Ice and Fire, we don't have the payoff, right, for the last two books. It's hard to see that, but it's not for nothing. So whenever I hear someone say, "Oh, I wish I would have cut this out or that out," it's like you said, it can resonate with different people, and there's always a purpose. There should be. There should be.
Well, there should be. And that's the thing. Sometimes there are stories that we look at where you go, is this necessary or is this a redundancy? Is it repetitious? Yeah. Is it actually serving your core theme? Is your core theme served better in these other things? And this is actually adding nothing new. It's not that there is never something in a book that you can't change. The difficulty is, and again, we all know the difference between absolutely horrible prose and good prose. But when you get down to that, well, what's the difference between good prose and great prose? What's the difference between, okay, so it's there, does it need to be there? And it becomes much more nuanced and complex and technical. Yeah. And that is the difficulty. And there are stories and series that I have read that I think there are meandering parts to them that add nothing to the story, that they add nothing to the series, and there's no character development. It repeats a lot of material. It's structurally repetitious and and I would say, well, okay, there would be where I would make a cut, but someone else might go, but I love that moment when they did that thing.
Yeah.
You're talking about Harry Potter, aren't you?
I would just cut that series right down to the bone.
But by the way, I loved your video on editing, like editing fast.
Oh, it was tremendous.
I really
Tremendous. That is a free workshop for anyone.
I like it.
Like literally a free workshop that is invaluable. I mean, you couldn't put a price on it, honestly.
Yay.
So, Johanna, how's it going?
Hi, sorry, my mic does this now and then. If it happens again, just let me know.
It's all good. I had to switch you back over to that side of the screen because I oh god, I'm all mixed up. Philip, you got to go in the middle.
You switched me and AP. Oh,
me and AP.
I just got nauseous there.
Stop it, Jimmy! Stop it!
Well,
Andy, that shop looks awful open. I thought we were talking about truth.
yeah,
I'm having compassion on you by not telling you the truth.
Nice.
No, I was selling stuff, which is always good. Keeps the lights on. Although the lights are about to come off. But my final thing I wanted to say before I had to jump off is because we haven't talked about probably my favorite comedic moment in Crippled God, which is also a very powerful emotional moment, but it's when Finir's body and his blood is raining down.
I was about to get to that.
on the Talana Mas, and just when they're about to make the big fight, only them, because they're immortal, stand a chance, and then they grow flesh and blood. And I think it's Tool that says that was ill-timed, and that's the end of the chapter. I laughed so hard. I just love that.
I'm so glad you reminded me of that. I laughed so hard.
I have
it's
4
so
paragraphs on this because there's so much stuff that happens in this moment. I mean, it's massive.
Yep.
So first we kind of start away from there, right? We have it. We see the Talana Mass are going to go in, but we see Karsa thinking about the Crippled God, and we see how that he had denied him when it was just the Crippled God and himself in that one moment. And he's starting to relate. Karsa's starting to relate to the Crippled God because he can understand being chained. A civilization was the means by which too many people could live together despite their mutual hatred, Karsa thinks. Karsa talks to the Crippled God artist from Memories of Ice. I think it's Munich. I can't remember the name. Manung. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And he lets him die in his arms. He lets the Munich die in his arms, which I thought was like, we could talk about how big of a push that is for Karsa and his character arc. But there's talk of civilization is very thought-provoking, but Fenrir appears in the sky, and we then cut back to Karsa going into Fenrir's temple and smashing the tusk and the altar in half with his sword. And is this what Habork was talking about in Dust of Dreams? Remember, he said that there would be a sword that would cut through an altar in Dust of Dreams. Philip's reading it, so he can let us know, because I can't remember the exact quote. You might get there, Philip. Let me know. There's a Habork scene.
Was that at the beginning?
I'm not there yet, I think.
Yeah, I think it's near the middle or end of the book, I thought.
Okay.
I'm over halfway through,
So we cut back to the battle, right? And we just saw him chop Fenrir's thing in half. And we see Tool looking onward as a sword descends from the clouds, and a mass sword. Like thunder clapping, a roar sounds, red eyes show, the cry of a dying god. Blood rains down, it covers the Talana Mass, and it brings muscle and skin to them. They are reborn in this moment. I mean, Karsa's sword coming through the clouds, it raining blood. Come on, guys. I mean, that's as good as it
And
gets.
then tornadoes.
And then tornadoes happen. And Olara Thiel gets killed because I'm forgetting his name. I always forget his name.
Torrent, right?
Torrent. I always
Yes.
think.
Torrent,
I always
that's
think.
right, yeah.
I always forget.
Doesn't he shoot?
He says, "I hope you see this talk," and he shoots her with the arrow. This whole scene is the best.
Yeah, and still on the other side of the spire is the whole Sin and
Gessler
Stormy and Gessler, and then Hood on the ship making the bay ice so he could make it to the spire. Like, it's just crazy.
This is
Hood's pulling a Frozone.
It's dude, it's so good. And we see the Jag Hunt join the Amass after they are revived.
Yeah,
they fight together.
Did you want to cry? Like, I just wanted to cry.
No, I was just screaming.
I
was just bashing the book off my face. Like,
I was up till 2 a.m. finishing those last 200 pages because of that ridiculous battle.
It's just so good. It's so amazing.
And watching through Talk's eyes, saying he cannot watch Tool die.
And then we like the part of the battle at the freaking Crippled God's like burial mound. Like, we didn't talk about that at all. Like,
we're getting there.
where the extreme, where the creme de la creme is fighting.
Yeah.
That was, I loved the battle. Was it the Battle of Barrow or something? Like it was.
I think
I
that's
like
what
that
it
a
was
lot.
called.
I
No,
mean, there's 3 climaxes that are all like worthwhile finishes to epic fantasies, but there's 3 of them, because I do think there is the battle at the first shore, when the Husk Sword is singing while he's killing dragons, like that's
So sick.
pretty dope. And then there's the batshit crazy Spire battle that is just incredible. We just talked about all that. But then like the same thing, on the fight on the Barrow has, we already talked about the laughing that scares away them, plus just general great fighting of the Marines. And then on top of that, the Worm God and Crust this, and that's also the climax of Korabas and the Otitarial and what that means for existence. So like all 3 of those are like insane finales that I would have been happy with, but there's 3 of them basically back to back to back.
And we see the bridge burners go one last time into battle because Talk says, like, are you going to join? Like, what are you doing? Because we have Iskar, aka Whiskey Jack, sitting there, and he goes, well, of course we'd never say no. And the quote is, when he threw that hand forward, the massed army of bridge burners surged on to the hillside, lunged like an avalanche, sweeping past Talk, driving his own horse round, shoving it forward. And one last time, the bridge burners advanced to do battle. Let's go.
Heck yes.
Are you kidding me? Let's go.
So why do I feel like a critical dragon is about to make a very erudite point?
There's matching tweed in the chat.
Well,
That's true.
I realized that because I had hurried to join this after the last thing that I'd been doing, that I'd taken my jacket off that I'd been wearing. I went, oh, hang a sec, Philip's wearing his tweed. I better bust this out again.
Terrific.
The point that I wanted to make is these are fantastic moments, and that moment of the Imas being made corporeal again, being made mortal again. But when we think of that almost as an echo and as a resonance of what happened in Memories of Ice, with the Imas sort of departing before that siege. That we saw that moment with Ikovian and went, oh, this is terrible. We see the same sort of thing happen again here. Wow. In the bridge burners, the army of the dead rolling forth. We've seen that before as well when we got to the end of House of Chains. That these are echoes and resonances that stretch through the entire series. And this is why when we talk about the need to reread, it's not a need. It's when you reread, suddenly you realize so much of the stuff that was happening earlier. Now that you have the entire context, it gains new context and resonance and importance. And you start seeing these patterns woven through the story, the echoes. And they're not one-to-one repetitions. It's not repetitious. It's echoes and resonance, and it's building waveforms and collapsing them. And we see how history repeats in certain ways, where we heard about the Imas and the Jagat banding together to kill and destroy Rist. And we see them banding together at the end here. These cycles in time. And that is one of the beauties of a reread, one of the beauties of looking at the series from this position and looking back and making those, and I know everyone is going to laugh, points of connection.
No, you're right. I mean, on a smaller scale, like me rereading Gardens of the Moon, I reread the first 2 chapters already, and it's just like, so much. There's so much there.
Like even knowing that it's Kellenbed and Dancer, like even knowing that, like when you reread Gardens of the Moon.
And
as far as the 2 Imas things, just real quick, I hated it both times. I was like, come on. I was like, no, not because I remembered that AP from Memories of Ice. I was like, you are kidding. I laughed my head off at that till time. And I'm like, not again. Yet again, their super weapons are stripped from them. And I'm going to lose a whole bunch of people that I like because I can't throw the zombies at them. Sorry, the skeletons at the undying skeletons at the back. I was like, son of a bee sting.
Speaking of, and one more echo too. I don't know if I imagined this, but it seemed like there was a part where where Fiddler kind of jumps on Hedge to get him out of the way. And it seems to me to echo back to House of Chains when Hedge Ghost does that for Fiddler. But in this scene, there's a fictitious character named Nefarious Bread who somehow appears. I don't know what that was about, but it was interesting.
Okay, I was just very sad because I knew it was the harbinger of more people that I liked dying, just like in Memories of Ice. Like, give us the undead horde. Like, let us throw them. Like, they can't die. They'll be all right.
They'll be fine.
They'll be fine. It's, they pick up an arm, reattach it. They'll be okay.
What did you all think though of Tool being reunited with his children and Hatan, who has new toes? Can someone explain that? I missed. Why does she have new toes? I don't know.
I think because she was dead and now she's not dead. I think she has a new body.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a scene where her toes got chopped and I missed it. I may have missed it.
Her toes got chopped in the hobbling.
Right? That was it, right?
The hobbling.
Oh, I'm an idiot. That's right. I'm an idiot.
It's interesting because I feel like it would be easy to be, to kind of criticize that, like, oh, it just seems so convenient that she suddenly is fine. But I don't know a single person who feels that way. I feel like everyone
they all came
universally feels like happy. It's just, it's like perfect. It sort of hits you at the right emotional moment, I think, when you're reading the book and you're like, yes,
we needed
I'm so happy this happened.
Yeah, I thought we needed it.
We needed it. Yeah.
Well, it's what we were talking about before with the humor and with this ultimately being an uplifting and affirming series. So I feel like it fits with all of that. Whereas if it had been left where it was, it would have been tough. And again, I think that has a lot to do with how you feel at the end of all of this. It's again going back to that essay or the essays by Stephen Donaldson and the feeling of these characters being reunited. I think it's something that we feel echoed in us as we look at the world outside us, and we feel that sense of connection with people around us. So yeah. I feel like it was the right move in this case. I really do.
One of my favorite things about this book is that it did end on such a hopeful note, which I did not like. Johanna, I thought everyone was going to die, and people did, and that made me sad. But everyone didn't die, and there were even people that got happy things at the end, which was awesome. Yeah. And that is, I think that's so much more rewarding for me as a reader that it. Because sometimes people are like, well, it's realistic. Like, that's the excuse. Well, it's realistic. Like, everything's horrible because that's realistic. Okay, I mean, that's fine sometimes. But yeah, I live in real. Like let something good happen, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't read Abercrombie, Alan. I don't think you like it.
I mean, sorry. It's just like that's one of the reasons I read fantasy is because sometimes, sometimes the underdog does get to win.
The futility of real life can be very exhausting.
It can be, but I feel the same way. I was actually really surprised how uplifted I felt. Like I said, I thought everyone was going to die. I really did. And I'm the worst at predicting things anyway. But my goodness, I'm still having an emotional high from the end of the Crippled God. Months later.
Well, one of the moments that stuck with me is after Hatan is back, which I loved. And to kind of just touch on that a little bit, I just want to say that this is all because Hatan's arc wasn't the hobbling. Hatan's arc is everything that Hatan brought to the story, to who she affected. She was very important to different characters. If Hatan's only purpose of the story was to do the hobbling to shock us, then this resurrection would mean nothing to me. But it means so much more because there was a lot before the we talk about the hobbling a lot. Obviously, it's a very important part of the story, but she was something before that. Her singular purpose was not to be hobbled in this story, right? So that's why I like the resurrection. Yeah, because I think it pays off a lot of the other stuff. What were you going to say, Alan?
She also shows us how different the Barghest are. Like, I liked the Barghest in Memories of Ice. I was like, yes, the Barghest, like coming to fight the Freaking Panny and Seer, get
Yeah.
back in your rent. And then all of a sudden we're in Dust of Dreams, and I'm like, what is going on with the Barghest? Y'all fall in, please. Fall in. We have an enemy. Why are y'all killing each other? Please stop. And so it's another one of the Blistig situations where we've seen, you know, the Barghest tribes from earlier in the series to what they've, you know, the divisiveness now. Now that, you know, Tool is the chieftain and all these things. And so it made me sad.
It's interesting how we were talking about the ending and how uplifting it is and how people question that. But when I hear a beautiful symphony and I feel a sense of the sublime and all that beauty, and I feel just elevated by that, I don't question that. Why do we do that with a work of literature? You know, it just
because we got to make a video about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
my favorite symphony is Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and the Storm movement, which is the fourth movement, is just incredible. It's basically how I feel about Malazan battle scenes. It's just incredibly dark and powerful and atmospheric. And then there's the final movement, which is the happy and grateful feelings after the storm. And that really is how I felt at the end of this book. It did. It was so, it was cathartic. It was very cathartic and beautiful. And even though I didn't understand probably everything and you had to explain to me things, I still felt so satisfied, more than I even imagined. So.
There's a fascinating tension when we read, because when we talk, particularly in fantasy, we talk about world building, we talk about realism. And like one of the reasons I try to avoid using the term realism is because like dragons can't fly. They're too big. There's no aerodynamics in the world that are going to explain how a dragon flies. I've seen a house fly.
You shouldn't talk about yourself like that, AP.
I've been done seen about everything.
But we accept. That's why we talk about suspension of disbelief. And when we get to something like Hedon's resurrection, if you take that school of thought of, but I wanted I wanted it to play out in a certain way, that this is unrealistic. This is playing into story. It's playing into narrative. And you go, congratulations. That's what Told the Hounds was all about, that this is a narrative. This is a story. You are being told this. Well,
gorgeous.
Steve, why do I even bother trying to talk about any of these things if you are just going to...
AP, go on. We still have another half hour.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When we think about that tension, we want elements of narrative where we want it simplified. We talk about there are so many characters, and I was having to learn all these different character names. I just want a core group of heroes that I can follow. And you go, because that's simplified, it's less complex than real life. But then in other aspects, we go, no, but we want it to be like real life. It is always a negotiation between what is narrativized, what is in that artificial story form, and what is mimesis, what is mimicking real life, and a level of suspension of disbelief that we can buy into. So there's always a tension between those two things. And in this instance, you can see why a number of readers felt that Hetton's resurrection was artificial, that it was too good an ending, that it undid a lot of these things. But for other readers, and myself included, I embraced that and rejoiced in it because finally something good.
Yeah.
That this was one of the most harrowing things that happened in the books. And yet out of it, it doesn't undo it. The Barghest still did the thing, but we are not consigned to the horrors, that something beautiful and hopeful and wonderful can still happen in the future. So I understand for some readers, they are disappointed that they didn't get the grim, gritty ending. But for me, in certain circumstances, for certain of these things, we got a happy ending, at least in part, for some of it. And again, it's that sprinkling through of something lighter, something full of light, to illustrate the darkness and to show hope for the future. And I think that is so important for the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's very important for the series. And, that's kind of what I feel of it. But there is that tension between those two sort of oppositions.
I needed it. I actually am surprised people have criticized that. I didn't realize that was the case.
well, I'm going to rain on your parade. Well, but seriously though, I think that we are left as the reader with a happy ending. But if we leave in this moment, if you take a second to think about everything that's going to happen now since she's back, there's a lot of really tough stuff that's about to happen. So is it a happy ending, or did we leave on a happy moment?
And you have that whole thing of, if you stop a story here, it's going to be happy. But if you extend it long enough,
so
you get into problems.
And sorry, I'm going on a tangent, so please continue.
It was to return to Alan's other point about the Barghast. Like, we saw from Memories of Ice that the Barghast had these very brutal competitions, that they were like that from the very beginning. It's not that Erikson suddenly did something out of the blue. This was shown to us in Memories of Ice. All of the duels that were fought because they couldn't see the rational thing to do, that they were locked into a particular way of viewing society because it was tradition. And we've seen tradition both celebrated and criticized because the past defines us, the past influences us. But if we are locked into it only because it is tradition, that is something to be questioned. And we see aspects of that time and time again through the series. And again, it's seeing all of these things as further illustrations of points that we have seen before, again, in a different light, because that's what we've been shown all the way through the entire series, taking events, twisting them 90 degrees and showing us a very similar event, but with that change of perspective.
Yeah.
I think Alan brought that up in our Toll the Hounds discussion, I think. I don't know why that sounds familiar. About tradition and about the problems of doing things just because historically, because we've always
yes.
Sorry, Alan.
I like the point that Carl.
I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
I like the point that Carl Peterson. Yep. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Carl Peterson says it's just like when Hood basically wouldn't take the Darujhistan Guard and Toll the Hounds. Some people in the series don't deserve the fate realism would give. Yeah,
and that's a very random, beautiful moment in Toll the Hounds when Hood says, just this once, I want to do what I want to do, and he saves the guy who was, a virtuous, decent, person just trying to make it in the world and do a bit of good, and Hood is just like, I'm gonna do what I want this time,
Yeah,
and it's wonderful. It's a beautiful moment, and I absolutely loved it.
And all of these things combined, by the way, because I hear a lot of people, especially people who read like a lot of other fantasy like us, right? They'll say, well, death doesn't mean anything in Malazan. No, it just means something different. And I think, honestly, I think it's a very silly way of looking at what this is. Like, first off, Malazan's different than everything else. So why wouldn't death be different here? But resurrection and all these things, they all matter in this universe because we've seen it firsthand, people coming back and there being consequences for it. And if you need a better example, there's two amazing, and it's right around the scene. Talk the Younger and Tool. Okay. Hedler. Oh my God. Hedge and Fiddler, which would be that would be their Hollywood romance name.
That's their ship name.
Ship name. But we see Fiddler pushing back and say, I've grieved you. I cannot accept you back. So in the fantastical and in a happy moment where we see Hedge again after he has died, we are still dealing with the realistic, if this happened, if my friend Matt was raised from the dead right now and walked in it'd be horrifying. It'd be a Stephen King novel, but also, man, that would be tough.
Yeah.
And Erikson explores that in Resurrection. So when people say, oh, death doesn't mean it, or it's lazy, I really just don't know what story you're reading, because that's not what I got at all. And it's one of those things that I will defend very vehemently, because I love how death is handled in Malazan, and I like the resurrections. And seeing, Tool says, I see you, brother. I was like, after the turmoil that went through them. And obviously Olar Thiel had a lot to do with that, but also Fiddler finally hugging Hedge and the talk of the coin of respect.
I love the coin of respect speech.
That was
awesome.
Tremendous.
Yes. I think that's one thing that I find so fascinating about this series is it really does kind of pull apart all the familiar structures that we're used to holding on to orient through fantasy stories. And I was commenting about this on Steve's video, because Steve from Steve Talks Books, he would review Gardens of the Moon, and he was saying that he wanted to reread Gardens of the Moon after getting some more experience in the fantasy genre. And I commented, I said, I don't know. It's an interesting question, because I think for some people, having more experience in fantasy, it might make reading a series like this a little bit easier, because they're able to sort of like see how certain familiar structures are being sort of deconstructed or being re-realized or reimagined or subverted in some way. So they're able to recognize what Erikson's doing. But on the other hand, if you have a lot of experience reading fantasy, it might kind of like frustrate you, because you are so attached to those familiar structures to orient you through a story. And so in a way, I don't know that having more experience reading fantasy necessarily makes that easier, but I think it is really amazing. What's been amazing for me is to read the series and to learn about what's happening and learn through discussions like these, and from watching videos that all four of you have put out, and to sort of just understand, oh, wow, this is what we're doing that's different in fantasy. Like what Alan is always saying about Dead House Gates. He's like, you don't, what is it you always say about the
you make it, like when you're inside of the walls, the guy makes it. He might lose everybody, like, but the guy makes it. Like you don't get killed outside of the walls. You get killed before. You don't get killed when you make it to the end.
But see, you being an experienced fantasy reader, just being able to point that out, I just appreciate that perspective, because I never really thought about it, honestly. But then when you said it, I'm like, yes, of course, you're right, Alan. And so just hearing those sort of seeing, oh, so we're taking a very different approach to a lot of these familiar structures we're used to orienting through fantasy. And at the same time, they're done with purpose. They're not done in such a way just to be like, haha, I did something different. There is sort of kind of like a humor there sometimes, but sometimes it's there to direct us back to those themes and back to like what you said about that conversation between Hedge and Fiddler, that was so beautifully said.
Oh man.
About the way we explore death, and about the way that we explore, just trauma, or explore compassion and empathy. And so I think what's brilliant about it is not only that it does take this sort of different approach, but it does it with purpose. And it does it to point us back into our own world through those themes.
A reintegration, you could say.
Yes, a reintegration.
Yeah, I'm learning, Philip. I pay attention during lecture.
That video was amazing. I do need to read that. Donald's gonna say.
And Johnny, you point out a brilliant thing there, which is subversion for subversion's sake, or a twist for a twist's sake, always ends up feeling unfulfilling. That when and you have seen this in Hollywood movies, you've seen it in books that you've read, that there's a sudden twist, and you go, but you've just put that twist in to go, shock, surprise, there you go.
Night Shyamalan movies.
And it always feels unsatisfying. But when we have subversion and it's being used for a purpose, for that an intention that you've just been articulating, that is where we see, and we do talk about subversion in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's subverting tropes. We sometimes over rely on that discussion, and we sometimes forget that it's not subverting it just for the sake of subversion. It's trying to do something with that subversion to either further themes, to teach us as readers something about ourselves and our expectations. That seeing them come up to the walls of Aaron, and you go, oh yes, I know what. Oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. What? And it challenges all of these preconceptions and the easy reading that we've gotten so used to. And I think it makes it interesting.
Yeah,
I agree. It's also a reimagining of what fantasy means and can be in a lot of ways.
What it can do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also there's things that we come to expect that end up getting subverted inside of the series, which is also really interesting, because we get trained a certain way to think about the Malazan universe or whatever, and then it's a subverted. And someone mentioned this in the comments, I think it was Kieran said this, but whenever Tavor turns around and she doesn't recognize Ganos, and it's like, she didn't recognize Felison and killed her, is she going to do this to her brother? And she doesn't. And it's like, I kind of, and Kieran said this, but I kind of expected, I thought Tavor was going to kill Ganos.
I'd have been so mad.
That is.
I did. I thought, yes. I think multiple people said in his chat, but I did. I wrote in my notes. I said, "Oh my God!" I thought Tavor was going to do the ultimate, an evil without really knowing it. And in some ways, I wonder if Tavor just didn't have any fight left after all this. Is that what saved Ganos' life in that moment? I don't know.
But we see that echo, and this time we get a different outcome. And we've seen it with some of the most difficult scenes and traumatic events in the series. And I know that Saren Pedak and Janeth are frequently brought up about this, and people complain about one or another aspect of the other. And sometimes we forget that, yes, they are in the book, and that's the scene that we see in the book. But when we look at the Malazan Book as a whole, and as a whole, that we see that each time, even these very difficult scenes, sometimes it's showing us the same thing. But where we looked at what happened to Felisin in Dead House Gates, and we go, why wasn't she healed? Why couldn't she have been magically healed of all of her trauma? And then when we see that happen in To Happen to Janeth, we then go, but that's robbing her of this. And we then are challenged with that. We always want the other thing. One is true to that situation, and it's those difficult moments of trying to explore it. But if those scenes hadn't been in the book, would we have contemplated it? Would we have addressed it? Would we have thought about it? And again, it's a lot of seeing things as echoes, as these moments. And when you consider the framing of everything as the Crippled God story about how abuse and trauma and pain can shape you, and then the different ways out of it. What do you want from it? How do you react to it? What does compassion mean? What does empathy mean? Are there costs to this? Like, all of those things get explored time and time again. And when you bring that focus of Kaminsod onto each of the books, a lot of the storylines and threads and explorations you see in this completely different light, and they realign and have almost a brand new meaning.
Yeah. And you've really brought something to my attention, AP. Hearing you talk is like the echoes, and like we've talked about Memories of Ice now, and we're seeing these things. That's something I don't think that I caught on to, and I'm excited to see in my reread how it goes. And I might even be in a piece of advice that I give people that are reading through it, like just look for echoes, just be on the lookout, because it doesn't say much, but certain people will connect with different things that echo throughout the entire series.
Malazan typology, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, Joseph, thank you so much for the 5 spots. I just wanted to thank you for the show and support. Live for these. Well, we do too. That's why we're spending our Saturday doing this.
Was
that you, Alan?
My text messaging noise from my wife is my wife going, hello.
I mean, just thinking of like Bloom's taxonomy, I feel like with Malazan, it's one thing to have really good analytical skills, but being able to have synthesis skills, because to be able to see how themes are across different books and see how they sort of dichotomies of themes. It's just, I don't know. I feel like there's just so much to sort of unpack in the series in that way. So it's just, I'm so excited to reread it someday. Really am.
I just love how I've been saying this from the get-go, is that Malazan battles are the best, but I also think my favorite moments in the series are conversations between two people I've been waiting to talk for a long time, or I didn't realize would be so interesting to talk. And Fiddler talks to the Crippled God at the end of the book, and it's astounding that I could have more respect for the Malazans than the Bone Hunters than I already did. And then you hear like the Crippled God talking to Fiddler, and you're like, wow. And then we also find out the Shadow Throne wanted to give the Crippled God a way out the entire time. And the Fiddler section after this is, closing his eyes again, Fiddler listened to the crunch of his boots until they were gone. Chains, house of chains. Us mortals know all about them. It's where we live.
Yes, I remember that. That's great.
Man, that's as good as it gets. I mean, I say that every time I I read a quote from this book, but it's true. Did anyone else cry when Calm killed Mappo? Because I cried. I know Alan hates Mappa and wanted him to die.
I do not hate Mappo. I do not hate Mappo. I like Mappo. At
You're
least
a
he
calm
knows where
fan.
he is, unlike Ikariam.
Oh, dude.
I think Terlac Veed separating Ikariam and Mappo is one of the most tragic things in the whole freaking series.
It hurt so bad. And then for Mappo to get there and then die.
Propaganda. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's awful. That's awful.
And then doesn't Ikariam like not remember Mappo? He says, "Who is that?" or something.
Yeah, he's like, I think he has like sort of like a feeling about him, but he buries Mappo.
That's terrible.
I think. Am I right? He buries Mappo. Is that correct? Yeah, and that also got me extraordinarily emotional. And Ublala Pung. Yeah. Again, this is one of those moments, AP. You can tell me that there's another side, but I gotta say, Ublala Pung killing Calm.
Yeah. That's not very nice.
I was so happy. Yeah. Oh, I was so happy. My boy Pung, who's coming in there with that hammer.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, but again, like when we see that, think of that in terms of when we are children and we see something bad, we have that visceral, immediate reaction, and when we are adults, we kind of lose that because we try to understand the world a bit more. We understand that there's complexity, but sometimes that simplistic, immediate reaction is the thing because it speaks to us. It speaks to our innate,
it's my nature,
desire for vengeance or innate desire for justice. And again, they're such complex issues, but we want that lashing out because it is simple, it is straightforward, it's not complex, it doesn't bother us.
Yeah,
but there are always ramifications for it, and like those moments, like I still sort of go, yeah, and then I go, am I secretly a barbarian at heart?
Yeah,
I like to think of myself as a civilized man, and apparently I'm not.
That Ublala Pung moment is also foreshadowed when he saves Breeze from the errant. You know,
that is something I remembered.
Yeah.
Point one for Jimmy. And also it's the pots. He sees pots, Mappo saved from the village, Ikariam destroyed, and he says he remembers something. And it is just like, man, that was rough. That was like one of those moments. I knew that would affect me. I didn't actually think Mappo would die. I actually thought the happy ending. I thought Ikariam and Mappo would get back together, and I didn't get that. And it made me sad. It made me big sad. But we did get the Herb and Hellion kiss. They kissed. Also, Smardev and Karsa.
I love that moment. That was so sweet.
Smardev and Karsa get it on in this book, which I was a big fan of.
Wait, what? When?
Yeah, it's very brief, and it's like I don't even know if he says the name.
He convinces her to. I mean, they decide that they're gonna turn the lights off.
Yeah, and I think it's even like that. It's like the lights are off and they're under the sheets or something, and it's like, oh my! And then the next,
or as Philip would describe it, they get close.
Do I even want to say what happened? I think I
just had a new Ublala Pung moment when I was reading that. I was like,
I think Smardev gets on her horse and she's like uncomfortable, and Karsa's just like, I hope I'm not I might be misremembering.
I probably just blinded myself to that.
I need to go back and reread. I might be mixing it up.
Goodness.
And this is where we find out in Jimmy's version, there's actually a page inserted where he's handwritten all of this.
Oh, you guys aren't writing fanfic as you go? Oh, yikes.
That's what Croker does in the Black Company, writes fan fiction about him and the lady getting it on. It's very weird.
Well, Croker writes fan fiction about the Black Company because he tones down all of the bad things they do.
Croker, like one of the most brilliant things about the Black Company is how the voice of the analyst, like he writes with a different voice of the analyst, and Croker toning down the awful things that those people do. They are not the good guys, but
it's all about perspective, Alan.
Look, and my perspective is Croker is the man, and so anybody opposed to him is on the wrong side.
Also, Ben actually just pointed out something that does not happen in this book. I do actually, the Karsa and Smardev do get together, but that soreness scene is actually from Berserk, and I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Guys, I read a lot of stuff. Okay.
I really was not.
Like I said, there's
like,
a handwritten note in Jimmy's copy.
Well, you could see. I think you could see what I was saying. I was like, did this really happen? Or
they do get it on. They do get it on.
Well, they do get it on, but the soreness horse scene is definitely way more of a Berserk thing for sure. So I apologize. That's not in this book.
I
But
did
then you
love
became
all
a
the
fan.
romantic moments. I really did like
Oh,
them.
I think Breeze and Anaricht are, again,
Mhm.
however you say, I think that relationship's amazing. And people who say that there's no good romance in Malazan, I would point them that way. I would also point
I
to
did feel well, I did have a little complaint about it because I did feel like they kind of got together off the page because in Dust of Dreams, she was kind of this awkward.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Did I write that?
My apologies. As soon as I
Um,
said it, I knew. I was like, this is not a Steve
That's
thing.
amazing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like an idiot.
You can use it for your next book, Steve.
Oh goodness.
Don't.
But yeah, I was a little disappointed not to see them actually get together. That it just seemed like they suddenly got together off the page, and then suddenly she was very comfortable with him. But I did love them. I loved them together, and I thought, yes, I absolutely love them, and I loved all the romantic interactions. I know a lot of people don't like, I guess what's called insta love when people get together right away. But that doesn't bother me
Well,
personally.
this also, like, you can assume things happen off page here, especially
Mhm.
in these books. So
Yeah, exactly. That's so true.
Alan specifically wanted to point this out for you. Gull's last words for Coltane was touching.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now
and then-
Gaul. Now that was a weird thing.
well,
Gaul
he kills
with
the Assail while his guts are falling out.
Look, I
Remember?
love War Leader Gaul.
He's thinking of Coltane.
War leader Gaul was like he revered Coltane.
Yes.
Oh, that's all he. Yeah, that was his
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah, which is why he's the bee's knees. I love War Leader Gaul.
He literally
Yeah.
his intestines are falling out. He holds them in and kills an Assail. It's
Yes.
the most metal thing
That
ever.
was crazy.
This
Yes.
is the burn tears. Don't mess with him.
Except for the fact that he was like sleeping with his son's wife. That was kind
Allegedly.
That's weird. But isn't,
Allegedly.
from Deadhouse Gates, aren't the burned tears, the conjugal burned tears, the ones that Coltane is afraid of? Like, aren't they afraid of before they like approach them that they're going to be a problem, and then they join? Right?
Right.
Is that the right tribe? Am I remembering that correct?
That's what I remember, Alan.
Yeah, and then so because they're known as the most fearsome, the most fearsome warriors in Seven Cities or whatever. And then Coltane pulls them into the fold because War Leader Gaul respects Coltane's abilities, and then from that we've got Gaul carrying on.
Whoa, that is a cool thread. I never really made that connection, honestly. So I feel bad not making that connection till now.
Yep.
Oh yes, nice. Then yes,
Alan
makes it even better. Makes it even better.
This is why I'm
War Leader
never
Gaul.
going on Book Jeopardy. But anyway.
Really Gaul's the best.
What you got from me, AP? I can feel it.
No, and again, it goes back to a lot of the same points of these elements and seeds that are laid early on, and it's not just about one man or one person or the great man sort of version of history. There are so many different parts and characters involved in creating the constituent elements that we see the fruition sometimes coming to a very positive ending and sometimes not making it the way that we wanted. Like the ending with Ikariam and Mappo is not what we wanted. We wanted them to get back together and walk off into the sunset.
I did.
But we see other things that where the seeds were laid in the past, they did come together. They do flower into this fruition of a positive outcome or something that was important. And when we think back to if this is Kaminsod's story, why start with Gardens of the Moon? And you look back and you go, well, who is important at the end here? Like all of these different elements at the end. Where do you start the story? Wow. Because he's not going to start with the day he landed on the planet. Because, okay, so for the next 300,000 years, I kind of sat here. And then in the last couple of years, all of this stuff kicked off. There are elements about how you structure this narrative and how you think about the narrative that when you start piecing them together, to understand who Tavor is, you need to understand the whole relationship she had with Felicent. To understand how they ended up in that, you kind of needed to know what happened to Perrin. You need to know who Shadowthrone and Cotillion are. You need to know who the Bridge Burners are. But where do you start their stories? Yeah. And we start seeing all of these different things come together. Coltane has nothing to do with the ending. Like, why did we spend so much time with Coltane? And you go, well, how important were the burned tears to the ending? How important was Coltane's lesson?
Oh, Coltane.
All of these characters to the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's a great
how important are these? So this is, going back to this idea. it's not that you have to reread, but when you reread with this knowledge, it is a different book. It is one of the bizarrest things ever. It's actually a different book.
Yeah, even like to understand Tavor, you have to understand Lorne, Adjunct Lorne, way back in Gardens of the Moon.
I love
and
Lorne.
So Tavor is
too.
Adjunct 2.0, you know, I mean, and it's a very important differences between those two in terms of their decision making and where they go. And so it all goes back to the very beginning.
Coltane is the cipher.
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say it.
I look forward to that video, Alan.
It's coming.
That video, Alan.
I'm just gonna quote AP. I'm just gonna
Just cut your head out and put it on him. It'll be perfect. I have to say, the way AP just framed that is pretty incredible to think about that, because I hadn't really considered that. Why did we start at Gardens of the Moon? Why did we get certain things? Man, you guys are like on it tonight with like my next points. The one thing about the ending that I when I closed the book and I kind of tried to process my thoughts is I was like, I wanted more color towards the ending. But if the Crippled God is telling the story, that means that what we saw of Kalor is enough of what we need to know of that journey and of the Bone Hunters and the Malazans.
Novels of the Malazan
This is your chance.
Yes.
Novels of the Malazan Empire.
Here's a question. Okay. Are the novels of the Malazan Empire also written by the Crippled God?
Good question.
Should I answer that? I guess. I mean, no. You don't have the same.
I didn't think so.
Frame narrative going on there, but honestly, yes, you will have a very different view of several important characters after reading novels of the Malazan Empire. Kalor being one, Taishren perhaps being another. AP.
I like it, Alan.
I remember I have a $10 bet with AP that I'll love Taishren by the end of the novels of the Malazan Empire.
I thought it was
I didn't say love. I said that you'll actually come to like him a lot more.
Oh yeah, there you go.
A small incremental improvement.
I won't hate him by the end of that.
See, this is why it's an easy bet, because you loathe him. So you just have to loathe him a little bit less.
Dang it, I should have looked at the nuance in that bet. Dang it, I do love Taishren. He sits there. Come do something, Taishren. Oh, I hate him in Bone Hunters sitting there.
I love it. Oh man.
But like, imagine like when you go back, Jimmy. I know that it isn't a priority to reread this whole series.
I already started
because you have other things that you're doing on your channel.
No, I literally already started. I'm rereading.
You're going to power through all 10 again right away.
Why not,
soon, Jimmy? It's too soon.
Why not? Let's just go.
Well, give it a chance to rest. Give it a chance to marinate.
Let him go for it. He's ready. Yeah.
I got Angel in a. Can I put myself down in the middle here? I can't. It won't let me. Here we go.
So
stuck in the middle with you.
There we go.
Oh, there we are.
I got
now, Philip.
Do your reread, Jimmy. Go for it. You can do it.
Hang on. Alan, what are you doing down there?
So wait, for Jimmy, for you, is AP your devil or your angel? And is Philip your devil?
I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, Johanna.
I thought it was obvious. No?
I'm stuck in the shadow.
Why are me and AP on the devil's side? What did I do?
Well, remember, you have to have sympathy for the devil. That's the whole point of this series.
Y'all need to have compassion for us on the right side.
This is amazing.
But in doing a reread, and I think people do honestly mistake this when people say, "Oh, the reread is so amazing," and they go, "Oh, well, why would I have to reread this series to understand it?" You don't. You get so much out of it on your first read that it doesn't matter that you don't get absolutely everything. There are very few really good books that you get absolutely everything the first time you read it.
That's true.
Great Expectations, Mansfield Park, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, like any great works.
Beowulf.
Philip would know.
Okay, so we've had the novels of the Malazan Empire pitch, and now we've had Beowulf. Does everyone have that on their bingo card?
I think Philip owns stock in Beowulf. I think they send him another translation every time he mentions it.
I want the Philip Chase translation. That's what I want.
I've translated parts of it.
Jesus. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I respect that, though.
Well, I was going to make a point, but it doesn't matter. Let's move on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just
I'm
completely
sorry.
knocked his train of thought off the cliff.
Philip showing his guns. All the
That's right.
Beowulf guns.
What about Smiles smiling?
Oh,
I liked it. It was nice, guys. Come on.
Yes, it was. It was nice. I am so disoriented that you moved this around. I'm just trying to get used to it.
All right, here. I'll put us back.
Sorry.
oh no.
Don't worry.
It's throwing me off.
I think you were down here.
It's like one of those puzzles where it's I have to constantly.
I
move.
actually don't remember where we were now, so
Wait.
it's
I'm definitely not where I was, but that's okay.
I think
Don't
you
always
guys were
complain.
over,
That's
but that's okay.
I was where Johanna was. You were where
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's not
I'll
right
just
either. I
I'll
don't
leave
know.
it. You could leave it. It's
All right, we're
fine.
leaving it here.
I'll get used to it.
we're coming to the end, guys. It's all falling apart.
We've all gotten a little punchy.
We're a little punchy.
Well, we have to talk about the epilogues. If we're
Well,
gonna
yeah,
talk-
that's kind of where we're at. I
Okay.
did want to say the Crippled God writing the book was a big like whoa moment for me. And now AP, I went back and watched the spoiler part of your video talking about Toll the House, talking about
Yeah.
the perspective of Krupp writing that or telling that story, and then adding on the fact that we also have the Crippled God retelling it. And I think it's one of the coolest things I've ever experienced, like reading. Like I love thinking about that. It changes everything. Even more so, obviously like the Crippled God now not being the big baddie at the end obviously changes things a lot. But then you add on the extra fact that the perspective has been through him the entire time. And it's like, whew.
Yeah. That was a very good video.
As much as it pains me to say something nice about my nemesis, everyone should watch that video that AP made on the I guess
Cypher, it was on Toll the Hound Cypher of the series.
Cypher
and
the
then-
series thing. Yeah, it's a great video. It really explains it. I think the most clear explanation I've seen of it ever.
Yeah.
And really great video.
Yeah.
It helped me a lot. I was really impressed with that.
It just gave me
Especially
a
'cause
different
it-
way of looking at things,
Yeah. Yeah. Just bringing in the Piran family and everything. Amazing.
Satak was pulled apart basically by the wolves coming through her, and then I even have it in my notes somewhere. That whole end was super tense, and the wolf gods are ones that I didn't really connect with, and honestly, I didn't understand everything that happened there, mainly because I only have so much hard drive space in my brain.
Yeah.
But I did remember. I remember I wrote in my notes somewhere in here where I just thought that the tension in that scene was insane. I'm trying to find it. It's actually hard. And that was one of those things that got built upon in Dust of Dreams and then finished here that we couldn't really talk about a ton last time. I'm trying to find
Satak was interesting. I remember finding it really interesting when she ended up kind of converging, I guess, with Talk for a while there and thinking, oh, that's so neat with the wolf connection.
Yep.
And then later on, I thought it was really interesting the way she sort of ended up converging, for lack of it, well, it's a Malazan word, I guess, with was it Tanakalian?
Tanakalian. Yep.
Because I thought it was interesting because I know at the beginning of when I was reading The Crippled God, the first half, I was thinking, they're both like, wait, is that right? No, I don't remember.
Basically, Satak dies as the wolves of winter come through her, beckoned by Krugava saying that humans were the real hunters. They kill better than wolves. Tanakalian stabs Satak and kills her, and Krugava kills Tanakalian, but she also dies with a knife in her neck. And it's just
yes, I remember that now.
Which is such a vivid image for the wolves of winter, like in what they are, always looking for that fight. It's like you couldn't have done that better.
Well, okay, I'm going to go the whole symbolic metaphor stuff discussion for a second if you want.
No, please, yeah.
But do you? Well, okay, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's curious that all out of all of the gods that we've met, the gods of war are animals?
Huh.
Yes, the tiger and the wolves.
Yeah,
and the boar.
And the boar, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Stupid Finner.
So the most brutal, barbaric, bestial thing, destructive thing is associated with these animalistic tendencies.
Although the humans are by far the most destructive animal.
Right. And we kind of supersede them.
But isn't that like a really interesting thing? Like all of these gods that we talk about, and yet it's the gods of war are the ones that are typically animals, that they prey on things, and that's how the humans basically are viewing them. And yet when we think about it, it's the humans in the series are the ones that are making war, the ones that celebrate war, that worship war, that desire war, that dedicate their lives to war. And yet what we see in this series is the horrendous cost of it, the futility of war at times, the sacrifice and the pain and suffering caused by war. And yet it's balanced against sometimes its necessity.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you know, Fenner dies. Like the gods of war kind of always fall, don't they? I'm forgetting the tiger's name.
Treach.
Treach. Thank you. I want to say Trek, but it's because AP was talking about Star Trek today. So
yeah.
But
Trek also, yeah.
So that you know, he dies earlier in the series, and then we see Fenner die, and it's like these gods of war are constantly being, you know, murdered, and they're it's usually humans doing it. It's fascinating. That's a really good point.
A natural state. Is war the natural state?
According to Hobbes, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I felt like Dust of Dreams was the book that kind of put all of that more under the microscope for me.
Yeah, brought into focus.
Yeah, just started seeing humans from other perspectives, and also the way that we treat animals and the earth. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the fact that, you know, saying that humans are better killers than wolves is what brought the wolves of winter out. I mean, that's pretty on the nose there too, I think, in a good way, or on the snout, if you will. All right, so at the very end, we see Cotillion stab the crippled god, release him from his body so that he can finally go with the jade pillars or spears. Someone wanted to ask this question, if I can find it. They said, any thoughts of Kaminsad being a being from our world? Oh, all good, Alan. Alan, you need to go? That's totally fine, man.
Sorry, I got dinner with family, but no, Professor, Doctor, Johanna, Jimmy, thank you guys so much for this discussion, and thank you for having me. I'm glad I could stick it out till almost the very end.
Yeah, we're almost there. You were pretty much there.
Say hi to Christina.
Great to see you, Alan.
They're waiting for me, so I got to jet.
Yeah,
bye guys.
It, man. Bye. See you, Alan.
Well, to answer the question briefly, and I have to go soon too. Is Cam and Sod and Steven Erikson. I don't know how much of a joke this was, but Cam, as in, you know, Ian Esselmont, Cam.
I thought that too. Yeah. I said, "Oh, Kaminsad. Interesting." And I would have never known that. But
Sod, meaning, I think he referred to himself as a sod there. But I don't know how serious he was there. So Cam and Sod. So that would definitely be from our world, I guess. But I think that was a joke, though.
Okay. I'm not the sharpest tool in the, you know, I'm here. That's what matters. But so he gets released. We go back and we get our epilogues. And the one note I had, because as I was doing this, I'll be honest, folks, like my notes got less and less as I went through, because I'm like, I just need to experience this. Like I've spent a lot of time in this world, and I don't want it to become a homework assignment, right? So the one thing I wrote down, I said Bridgeburner saying goodbye to Fiddler and give him his new fiddle is absolutely gorgeous. And Fiddler being in the epilogue fishing for whatever is in the deeps, right? And the kids talking to him. And I thought about everything Fiddler had been through. And Fiddler is the one that thinks about the walk. He thinks about, why do we keep walking? And it relates to the snake in this regard, because it's the only thing to do. And it's all a whole this thing about loving our loved ones, knowing it's going to end in grief. Guaranteed. There's literally no way around it. It will come to an end. It's going to be very difficult. And why love if it's only going to be a grief? Why keep walking if you don't know where you're walking to, or if at the end you might die, right? Through the glass desert. And Fiddler did all these things. And for all of this stuff that Fiddler did, it was for him to finally sit on the pier and throw out a rod, throw out his line and go fishing. And that's what it all is. And I think about life, we work and we go through these things and we stress out, and in the hopes that one day we get to settle down a little bit and maybe go fishing. And maybe that's a very on the nose interpretation of that, but it brought tears to my eyes because I constantly think, what's the point of things? I am a nihilist I definitely am. It's just how I am. And it's hard to explain that to someone. Like, how can I think that there's no point to anything? And I'm like, well, the point is whatever I make it. So it is the walk is that. And I don't know. That just really resonated with me. It's also hard to kind of put those thoughts out there because I'm still thinking about it. But.
Well, I think that for one thing, I wouldn't consider you a nihilist, but we could have that conversation some other time. But I do love what you're saying, because I know that, and I only remember this because I put this in my video. Thank goodness for videos. But there was a wonderful quote that Fiddler had, I think, in the chapter where they intersected with the snake, where he talks about how destiny is a lie. And he's reflecting on why they're doing what they're doing. And so for, it's like he kind of gives up on that sort of idealized kind of ending to things.
See you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for writing a phenomenal fantasy series that I got to read 10 books in and will continue to read. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it's just beautiful that he got that ending, after giving it all up. And it also kind of just takes me back, like the fact that he gave it up in the first place and still did it anyway. The idea of doing what they were going to do, because and as much as I said, I thought everybody was going to die, they thought they were all going to die. Yeah. And so to do something anyway, and to make meaning out of it anyway, even if no one was going to witness it, to me, it almost kind of speaks back to the theme of reciprocity brought up in Midnight Tides. That's something that kind of came back up for me. But yeah, it's beautifully done how it came back, how he did get his ending even after he gave it all up. He was willing to give it all up.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful talk about echoes. What a beautiful echo to Gardens of the Moon.
Absolutely.
And if you ask Philip about the importance of why he's fishing, we just discussed a very important poem in Dust of Dreams that is all about the importance of fishing.
Song of Dreaming. It's Song of Dreaming. It's the epigraph to book 3. Yeah, so it's absolutely central, Jimmy, to what you were just talking about. And it's in Dust of Dreams.
Okay. I need to watch this. This is whose channel is this on?
It's gonna be on my channel on Tuesday.
Okay, I was gonna say I feel like I've watched all your guys' stuff, so I was like, I didn't see this.
I love your poem discussions. I love them so much.
Is Fiddler the Fisher? Because we never find out who Fisher is.
Fisher they're separate people, but
I like
the metaphor of fishing is important.
Okay,
they have to be different people because of Toll the Hounds. We meet Fisher in Toll the Hounds.
Yeah,
well, I was going tinfoil, but yeah. So that's what resonated with me in the epilogues and stuff, and the weather vane. I mean, it's excellent, guys. And kind of what I said this in my monthly wrap up video when I kind of wrap up everything I read, and I said the only thing I could say is a story that is this big and supposedly not intimate with characters and stuff. The ending of this series, it's such a silly thing to say. The series though as a whole comes to this conclusion in one of the most intimate ways I've ever seen a series ended. It reminds me very much of Realm of the Elderlings in some ways, because I thought that was just so intimate. And for this series to have the scale and the scope that it does, then to end, it is almost a subversion of what you would expect. The real ending is the intimate over-the-shoulder moment with Tavor and Ganos and I Lost Her and Fiddler fishing and stuff like that. And it's like those little moments. Yeah. And Smiles like smiling, that those are the real ending moments that are so intimate and paid off for everyone who really paid attention.
And but on that point, when you think of all of the big moments in history, like say the armistice being declared in World War II, that you go, oh, that's a big moment. But how do we show it? We show that soldier down in the muck, hearing that and knowing in that moment that they will live to the next day.
Yeah,
that it's the human moments that sell stories. And this is why Philip and I talk so much about the themes and the resonance of them and how they connect to the human condition, because humanity is at the core of all these great stories. You can love the big events, But if they are empty, if they are hollow, if they don't have the people in them, and that connection with the people who have gone through this, if we don't see that, then we miss out on the power of what has just happened. So I think you're exactly right that coming down to those, in the grand scheme of things, tiny moments, but that is where we find life. That is where we find meaning. That is where we find the beauty and joy.
Yep,
that's absolutely right.
Where we find each other,
and we all found each other through these books, and we've had some excellent discussions. I unfortunately do have 3 episodes because I also have to get to do some things. But I think we covered a lot of this, and I don't think this is not the ending for everyone watching. By the way, I'm going to continue to read the novels of the Malazan Empire. I'm rereading right now slowly, but it's going to be at a much slower pace and a way more personal experience because it's not going to be like in the forefront of my channel, but I'm going to be reading the novels of the Malazan Empire. And I think we should maybe even do like a full series, recapping stuff. I think that would probably be a good thing because this is very much about the Crippled God, but there's a lot of things that we could go into and really dive into those echoes and whatnot. But I think that the cool thing about this is it's those moments in time that AP just talked about. And I will always remember this as a moment in time. And if I could say anything about you three, and Alan and Andy are obviously not here, and Rhythm Mod joined us on the earlier ones with Philip before, but it's like part of the reason why you continue the walk is because you find people to walk next to. And I've been able to walk with you guys. I've been able to walk with all of you in chat who have been there, and it's been really amazing. And I hope for all of you that you are able to cast your line out into the bay and have your fishing moment someday. So.
Thank you, Jimmy. That was beautifully said.
Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, it's been a beautiful thing talking about these books with you. I appreciate it.
It's been excellent.
Been so special to be alongside you on this journey too. So thanks.
I just want to say, again, really sorry for turning up late, but I really appreciate and I'm very, very thankful that I could join you on this because it has been so wonderful seeing all of you discuss these things. And it's wonderful to be a part of that. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I've learned so much from all of you in different facets. And I think we're not done learning yet. And I think we have a lot more conversations we can have just about these 10. But as I go through all the other books, I'm going to be pulling you in, bring your cussers. We're Ascendants now. We're big time.
Right.
But Philip, Johanna, AP, thank you. I appreciate you guys so much. Everyone, if you haven't, you guys are subscribed to their channels, but if you haven't, do it or else. Chad, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Does anyone have any parting words?
Congratulations.
Keep turning the page. You got it. He said the thing. He said the thing. Now I can tell AP watches my videos to the end. That's good. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for being here. I wouldn't be here without you all. Make sure to hit like on this video. It helps people find it after the fact. But until we see you next time, be good, be safe. And like AP said, remember to always keep turning the page.
Yeah.